should get knocked off, and maybe from staff's perspective on what they think the resource allocation would need to do this.
Yeah, so we already have, in terms of hens, I believe there's examples from Roslyn, Caslow, Castlegar. So there are local examples that already exist and are really successful programs. So I think in order of staff time, I mean, we could literally pretty much replicate exactly what already exists, which is the benefit of having local governments is that there's no problem if we steal the information of a good program that's working elsewhere. And in terms of the apiaries for the bees, I've also spoken to the person that basically oversees all of the apiaries from a provincial level in terms of regulation in this area. And he was able to provide me with bylaws that they were really successful with. And so, you know, because we are not recreating the wheel and because these things already exist, I think that, you know, in terms of staff time, it should be significantly less than a lot of these larger projects that we see.
But to be fair, if I may, we knew that when we talked about it before, that that Roslyn had their program, that Castlegar had their program. And again, I'm all for backyard hens and apiaries and all that, don't get me wrong. But what we heard from staff was that this was, to localize it to Nelson's context, especially given the rat problem and others, it was gonna take some significant staff time. That we knew that at the time. So it'd be great to know what's changed. Yeah, again, Roslyn's got a program, but we knew that before. Is this, because what I'm concerned about is that something has been a declared staff priority at our priority settings meeting is going to be dropped, you know, so.
Yeah,
So,
let's probably,
hang on a second, let's, let's try and get this sort of, first of all, we're lumping in this here that's in front of us without actually doing the research on having other animals in the municipality. So we're basically saying to this particular question that's in front of us, you go ahead, right? In the meantime, we're going to develop a new bylaw and council may or may not approve it when it comes back to allow the keeping of bees. And it seems to me those should be kept separate.
yeah.
And I'm
Yeah,
struggling
if you
with.
want to make I think council's just, I guess, is it for adoption on the council procedure bylaw of how, you know, how to move those
Yeah.
pieces forward, and there's lots of time.
Yeah.
Council as a whole wants to look at that, but I agree with Councillor Wattenberg of, you know, I would want to go back to development services staff and,
Yeah.
you know, there's more steps to it, steps than just replicating. It's how are you going to enforce it, and looking at breeding and, you know, a bunch of other things. This is,
I think that's all covered in those other bylaws, though.
yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean it fits in Nelson, and it will take some staff time. And,
Of course.
Yeah.
so
I think the
probably
question
as much on the
Yeah.
enforcement and
was time.
the
First
building
off.
inspection, et cetera. So,
That's what I heard from
No,
Lautenberg,
just
is
a
how
moment.
much time, how much resources.
Okay,
I have
hang
to go
on.
back to development services and ask them. I just, you know, this is for March 2021. I think your good process is what you've done in the past is to say, okay, well, where does this fit? You know, so I'm not sure what your, you know, I think this is part of a strategy of moving forward local food production. And, you know, is this the best strategy to move that forward? It may be, but you may want to do some other things. So we probably want to talk to, you know, the food security projects that, you know, that are really at the RD level as opposed to, you know, they've done more of the work in that area. So certainly it's something I just suggest.
Well, I know you're not in
Yeah,
favor of
so-
it. I just want council to.
I'm not in favor or not in favor.
Okay.
I'm just suggesting that you look at the larger thing and decide where it fits in there, and you know, ask those folks that, you know, that have more expertise than we do here.
So I just want to go back. I'll go to you in a second, Councillor Woodward, and then Councillor Morrison. I just want to go back that in front of us, we're dealing with this one issue here, and maybe we want to deal with that and then have that conversation. Does that sound fair?
I mean, we can strike down my motion at the table if we want.
But within that motion, you have both. You have two pieces of the motion. At least the email I've got, I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe-
no, there's definitely two pieces to that.
Which is a second problem for me, and that is that I got it at 7:02.
Well, we always change motions when we debate around the table. That's part of our process.
No, but it's clear that you've done some research into this, right? And it would have been nice if we'd have had
Point of
that a
order,
couple of days early. Like, for me, it's hard for me to digest this at this time,
That's fair, but
you know, so.
let's hear from the table. There's a lot of back and forth between the chair and,
Okay, what I'm suggesting, if it's okay with the mover, if we concentrate on the one that's on the agenda, and then if you wish, bring the other piece forward on its own in isolation.
How do you feel
Understand what I
about
mean?
that?
As,
You could just split the
Just split them, that's,
motion to deal with the current request.
Okay.
I still want to hear from
yeah.
and
Councillor
then-
Morrison.
Excuse me, I'll be the chair.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And the next in line for speaking was, I'm just giving you an opportunity here if you wish, but if you don't, that's fair too. Because it may be unfair to the person that's got their motion in front of us.
Okay.
Because
For
council
the
doesn't have a
fairness
chance
of
to
the person
debate.
that has the motion in front of us, I will split them up,
Okay,
if that's okay with my seconder.
Yep.
okay. So let's deal with the agenda item, please. And then we'll discuss the overall picture of hens and bees and whatever else you want, backyards. Is that all right? Okay, so in front of us, there's the recommendation from staff is the council deny the request for exemption for.
But I did move that they
She's put a
approve.
motion on the floor, so this
You want
says
to,
that we
you're
approve
gonna
it.
withdraw it?
No, I was splitting them up, and so I said that we approve the request. That was my motion.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Sorry,
Thank you.
go ahead. Now, will there speakers on that? Councillor Woodward.
So I feel like there's a process piece here, and we talk a lot at this council table about one-offs and the cascade effect that they can have and the complexities that they can bring. So I am totally in favor of food security, but I want to do it right. And I just want to argue that, we have a bylaw in place. We're always trying to have everything under an umbrella. We're not just picking and choosing different projects and saying yes, no, yes, no. We have a bylaw in place, and that's, I think, what we should be judging this piece on is the current bylaw. And then if we want to evolve that bylaw, I feel like it should be separated, because if we're giving this person a pass, then what stops other people coming forward and looking for a pass? And then we're starting to do a whole bunch of one-offs, which I don't know. I just don't feel like that's the proper process. But so I'm totally in for food security, but I really feel like it needs to be done right and researched well by staff, and moved forward in a proper manner, rather than just like all of a sudden.
Councillor Morrison?
Okay, so now we broke them up. So, so my thoughts on the first one about giving this person the exemption is that I'm not in favor of granting her an exception at this point in time, for much of what the reasons that Councillor Woodward mentioned. And I'm looking at some of the concerns that have been brought up before by our wild safe person, Dave, who comes in and talks about the associated issues with rodents and skunks and raccoons. And I'll be the first one to say that I actually know some people have rabbits and they keep them in their house in pens, and they are family pets. So they're not outside in hutches or running around in carports. I did take the opportunity to go and look at this site. And I'm just, you know what, and I think it's great, and I applaud the people that wrote in and supported her request. But at this time, because we have a policy, and that's my bigger fear, is that this week and it's unfortunate the way our bylaws run to a certain extent, because this was complaint driven. If there hadn't been a complaint, these little bunnies would be hopping around in the backyard without a problem. But now, you see this come forward, and what I see is that it'll be next, all of a sudden somebody is gonna complain about the chickens next door, they've been driving them crazy. And we are gonna have these one-offs, one after another, so I would then defer back to the concept that Councillor Lockenberg was discussing, and that is, if we're gonna do this, we need to go back and do it again properly and bring it to a strategic planning session to see whether or not this whole concept of A and B go together, because as much as, just to speak to the second point, and if I need to when we get to that again, is about food security. So I have read those bylaws because they've been in front of us before, and I like to be informed. And I know that I find food security in terms of having chickens in your backyard is a little bit almost like recycling is kind of like greenwashing, in the fact that you're not supposed to sell those eggs that are in the backyard. So the only food security that's for, it's for the people that live in the house. And I think a lot of people that advocate for, oh, we should allow people to have chickens in the backyard, is that they're going to be able to walk down the street and I'm going to be able to buy from Councillor Renwick some fresh eggs. But they are supposed to be for personal consumption. So in terms of food security, I might have a fresh egg, but my neighbor isn't necessarily going to have a fresh egg. So I have a hard time with the sort of the food security issue around that as well. So I have difficulty on a number of levels. None of them are particularly right. I don't think any of them are wrong, but I will be voting against the motion that is on the table currently.
Councillor Lockenberg?
I had a few questions about this, and I know it's not appropriate out of this meeting to ask a member from the public. But my understanding was, and I'll just preface my comments based on this understanding, is that these are pets. They're not food, so the question of food security is completely separate. So when we're dealing with pets, I think the question for us is, does this exemption, is it different in kind than the exemptions that we deal with at this table all the time? Everything from variances to other things. Or does it open up an entirely new policy front that's going to require quite a bit of staff time and focus to deal with in an ad hoc way? And if I've learned anything at this table in the last 2 years, it's that when we throw things ad hoc on the table, they tend not to get done well. It's, I was probably one of the biggest, people responsible for throwing things on the table and trying to get a majority to support them. But realizing maybe that's not the best to build a good culture here. But on this issue, this does seem to fit within the realm of where exemptions do fit, because I don't think it opens up a policy front. When you're dealing with pets, as Councillor Morrison said, cats and dogs are something that we openly support or allow in this community. And rabbits as a pet are much less of a burden on the community as a whole than cats and dogs, for sure. Cats and what they do to killing birds, dogs in terms of the noise and all of the stuff that they produce, and yet we fully accept them. Whereas rabbits, and I've had rabbits growing up, I have a number of friends in town who have rabbits. They're really wonderful pets that do provide a lot of emotional comfort at a time for people who would, if they didn't get have those rabbits, they would be getting a cat or a dog. And I'm so glad that they have rabbits as opposed to cats or dogs, given that it's just a much less intense pet. So I think it's the kind of thing that we should be encouraging and supporting. The people that I know that have rabbits, they have them inside though. Yeah. And I think that was part of the question is, and I don't know if it's appropriate, so I'll defer to the chair. It's not appropriate. So that's my question is when I had rabbits growing up, we did have them inside too. So it's because I'm concerned, and as some of you know, we've been having an entire block in my neighborhood of chickens destroyed by a black bear. We've now got one house left that has chickens, and probably tonight they'll be gone, just one house after another. And we've heard that these attractants for bears, it means, and we had it at 6 Mile, we lost 6 bears in 2013, 2014 in one summer. And that's not what any of us want. So that's my caveat. If WildSafe can say that this is something that is hidden from view, is protected, we've dealt with that, then I do think this is, rabbits, it seems to me an obvious thing we should include in terms of dogs, cats, and rabbits. So I would support this exemption while we, fix that, what I think is a small issue, in terms of broadening it.
You keep in mind, you may not fix it though when it comes back with a review.
How do you mean?
Well, so just so you understand the process, if eventually we're asking staff to come back with a proposal that would show that these animals could be kept in the municipality, it may be turned down. So,
By this table?
yeah, so
voted
you'd be
down.
could potentially be giving a person false hope by giving the variance tonight,
Right.
and
But-
then review
yeah,
would come
that's-
back. Do
that's
you
a-
understand what I mean? So
That's
just so you know,
That's a fair point, but I would grant them then the exemption until that is done, because if we did grant the exemption in 6 months or 8 months, or not the exemption, but if we did sort of broaden the definition to include rabbits, and they've lost their pets, people consider these pets as part of their family, and so just to take them away and then say, oh, 6 months later, it did make sense to. It just seems cruel at a time, and I don't know this situation, so maybe it's not, but if it is, I can imagine that's a pretty heartless thing to do, I would think.
Can I just clarify staff, so you're separating
rabbits.
pets from,
Yeah,
food security?
that's
So
from what I
you're
understand.
looking at this from a
A pet's
house pet.
a
And
house
I think
pet
that's the
perspective.
spirit of our bylaw is house pets.
Yeah,
not
which is what I
backyard.
understood, that's what I thought, and so
we
in
do
my
not-
mind, it's more of a, kind of a,
And just
we
to
just
clar-
didn't,
clarify, we don't allow breeding of any animals, dogs, cats. You can't have a breeding process in
Facility.
municipal, in homes, right?
Yeah.
But
That's
as a,
that's the current
just a
piece.
question on that. People do breed their animals, pets, all the time, they just don't do it for business purposes.
Well, you
Is
can't
this-
do it, obviously you can take your other animal and, get it bred, but you can't have a commercial.
No
And-
puppy
and
farms.
This is not a commercial operation, is it? No, so it seems to, again, fit within that,
Three
like,
rabbits.
if you're selling, I'd totally give it to
We
you.
do have I think a limit
Numbers.
on two. So you can have a cat and a dog, or a rabbit, rabbits are here, a rabbit and a cat or whatever. So that's the other thing in the current bylaw is the number, and,
So you can't have 3 dogs in town? That's interesting, I didn't know that.
yeah, it's just trying to find that balance of what's too much in a neighborhood.
Right. Well, okay.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks,
for that.
Councillor Lochinvar. Councillor Page, you were next.
Yeah, I just want to say that I do agree with Councillor Lautenberg that I don't think this kind of exemption opens us up to a flood of exemptions. But from the food security angle, I think what's being forgotten here as a gardener is it's more about these animals processing something, creating nutrient, putting that back into your garden cycle, and back and forth and back and forth. On the concept of, I would also basically support this until we had the animal control bylaw in front of us on a more comprehensive level. But for rabbits, I think specifically, there are certain numbers that are just appropriate for an animal like a rabbit. A dog will bond to your family, and so therefore it gets its social interaction from the fact that there's multiple people. Cat does the same thing, but rabbits bond with each other. They need, 3 as a minimum, and to be healthy mentally. And I think what it is for me in this area is that mental health, that dynamicness of exposure to children and their ability to interact with different kinds of animals and see what's going on and have that diversity going on. I think it just adds life to this neighborhood. I think we see it played out in the calls we got and in the letters that we received, that for many people, this is a piece of joy for them in the neighborhood. And for some, it's a point of contention, but I think as people, we need to get more comfortable with different experiences and what that looks like. So I would support this I would like to see the animal control bylaw come back in a more comprehensive way to deal with the hens and to deal with the bees. I think some of those are easier things to come back to us. I think some are more of a slam dunk, but on this one, I think this proponent has actually brought something really lovely to Fairview, and I think it should be fought for.
So if somebody shows up with a baby duck for the next meeting, then will we
Yes.
With baby
another,
duck.
another exemption? No, really, that's what we're talking about here. That's the reality of it. If somebody shows up with a pet duck at the next meeting, then we're gonna be asked for an exemption for the duck. Like, why don't we deal with this when we're dealing with it, as exactly as brought up earlier tonight? Do it together and do it comprehensively, because what we're doing now piecemeal is, we're saying yes to this particular issue, and that'll be a yes going into the conversation around what's approved going forward. So, that's just my only question, because that's really what happens, is the pet duck will be here, the chicken will be here, and we still won't have done the review of what should or shouldn't be in our neighborhoods. Now, I live in town and I know, I mean, my neighbors have a couple of cats, right? And the cats are babies and they're all excited about the cats being babies, and all the kids in the neighborhood are overlooking at the cats and they're all happy. 3 months from now, they'll be adults, there'll be nobody looking at them. So if we're gonna piecemeal these bylaws, then let's piecemeal them. But we have these issues on a regular basis. So this is not the easiest one to deal with.
So, may I?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So, I feel like in the, again, I'll go back to our job is to try to have policy that is covering the most people, and I feel like, exemptions are challenging, because it seems like then we get into that process of picking and choosing. And so it feels like we should really be using the policy we have at this moment, because it's an umbrella policy that looks over all of Nelson and has been. And then on the furthermore part, we add that we would like staff to bring back, well, same of what you said here, Councillor Anderson, that so, and further that staff be directed to revise the animal regulation. So that part we could have in there. But I do feel like, going against current bylaw is, it's that bylaw is put into place to protect the most people possible. So, and just with one thing is to remember that there are neighbors in a tight neighborhood, and some will like it, some won't. But at least the bylaw is there to say, this is the rule for everyone. And to then just pick somebody out and say, but they're allowed to have it. That could go either way. And, the person who has animals right now could be really upset about somebody else having a loud motorbike or something that we don't have a bylaw for. So I'm just saying, I feel like we really need to make sure we're trying to cover everyone as much as possible. That's our job here, but we can still modify a bylaw through some good research and some time.
Councillor Morrison, Councillor Anderson, and Councillor Lockton.
So, as I listened to the discussion around the table, and it would really be based on the position of the mover, is whether or not, I don't even know how this would work, whether or not we just refer this back to staff and, to deal with what I think Councillor Woodward is asking in part for, is to have a proper review of the bylaw, because any bylaw that we give an exemption to, it always gets a bit crazy. It doesn't have to deal with specifically this rabbits. It's the process. It's the process of what we're asking to do here, and whether or not we can land on a time where we can see this fitting into the next round of review. And my position at that is, if that's where we went, is that in the interim, this woman gets to keep her lovely bunnies in the backyard and that we're not gonna be sending animal control after her in the next 30 days for not, because we won't have made a decision. Like, if we don't make a decision about this, you know, I mean, we're now aware of it. The person that owns the bunnies is aware of it. There might be some change in habitat or other things that go on, but that if the end of the day is to change this bylaw, is that we change this bylaw in the appropriate fashion instead of one-offing it. So my recommendation would be referral, but I can't sort of, well, we could vote on referral, but.
So, may I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it's interesting because I had originally put these pieces together and now they're separated. And so if we have them separated right now, then one's contingent upon the other. So we would actually want these two motions together so that we would be able to vote on them together, which is what you're proposing. Because otherwise we could approve one and deny the other, or vice versa, right? And so you could end up with something that's, you know, we approve that we're going to refer this back to staff until the new bylaw comes, but then we're going to deny that we're going to have the new bylaw brought forward, right? Do you know what I mean? So I'm just wondering if they should then be put together again?
I'll let Sarah will explain that to you.
I'm just thinking that perhaps you should deal with the first thing and the question that is in the report, which is, are you going to approve a bylaw exemption? Like, deal with that first
Yeah,
off.
that's
And then
the easiest thing to do.
the second piece
Or
can
not.
be, or not, yeah. And the second piece then can be, do you want something to be done with the bylaw? So,
I'm also hearing, is that pets, or is that food security, or is that both?
well,
And that's why we need to
but
have that
our,
discussion.
yeah, and so that's something that could be ironed out. Is that what you're getting at in the bylaw?
Well, I think we have a bylaw that really deals with pets right now,
It does
right?
deal with this, yeah.
It doesn't deal with food security at the present time, right? So,
Food security
the
when
easy
framed as
one-
the animal.
pardon?
Well, the manure. Like the manure in your garden is a food security piece that isn't.
Pollinator, I mean, you're not like, it's, you know, honey from bees, I mean, that's the apiary, it's because you're pollinating, right? You're creating,
Yeah.
so that's.
No, I get that. One's relatively easy, right? Most municipalities have rabbits as part of their pets bylaw, for lack of a better word. I don't know if 3 is normal or what is normal for having rabbits. Can they be outside, or should they be inside, or so I think that piece you could do. I think the food security piece of it, whether it's a rabbit or a duck or a chicken, I think is really a separate category. I know they're both in the animal control bylaw, and you'll have to, if you want to have it broader to include that, you know, I think they fall in the same bylaw, but I think it's different than having obviously a cat or a dog, right? You know, I think a rabbit likely could fall into either category, depending on what you're doing with your rabbit
Rabbits,
at the end of the day. I just think, so that, I guess that's why we said separate it. If we're dealing only with rabbits as pets, which is what's been asked, is, you know, I think that one's probably either can have an exemption, you can ask us to do a bit of research on whether that's common, to have rabbits as pets in the bylaw. The food security is quite a bit broader. We haven't done any work, but there's, as you said, there's lots of work been done out there. But I think they're building a whole new regime for the food security piece, whereas the pet piece, you're just likely adding pets, you know, that pet to the other pets that you allow currently. So I think you could probably deal with that one.
Yeah, I
And
mean.
I don't think you need a tie to ask to get this one done over here.
No, I mean, it is sort of like it's an interesting social construct, right? Like, it's dogs and cats are pets, but hens can't be pets. Rabbits are sometimes pets. It's like this really interesting way that we've structured the animal kingdom into some things are pets and some things are livestock. When, you know, it's an interesting way of framing it. I think that it's an animal control bylaw. It's the way we control animals within the city. You know, whether you have hens because you like the eggs, or whether you have hens because you like the manure they give you for the compost. You know, those are who cares? You know, I think it's just allowing these types of animals in the city. And in terms of pets, I mean, how, you know, I think of like us as a government, you think about overregulation. This woman has, you know, 3 rabbits, and we're going to say, potentially like, no, sorry, you can't have your rabbits now. We might allow you to have your rabbits later. It's, you know, there's conflict. We also have conflict when the neighbor's dog barks for 4 hours on end. You know, there's going to be sometimes conflicts with neighbors and animals. But I really think like, let's, you know, I could not imagine if this conversation was about my dog right now, I'd be in tears. You know, it's like 3 rabbits. Let's, you know, allow this exemption and then work on the bylaw.
When I was a kid, we used to have pigs, and Sal would have about 12 or 13 little ones.
Yeah.
We always had a pet,
Yeah.
and we had the pet pig for the longest time.
People have pet pigs.
But we all sold the other pigs, and
Yeah.
they were made into bacon, right?
Chickens are
But
highly
the
trainable.
pet pig eventually became a big pig, and then he was eventually sold for bacon. So it was only a pet for a short period of time.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Renwick.
Thank you. The fact of the matter is that we have a bylaw in place right now, and she's breaking the law. And I would go back to what Councillor Lotgenberg and Councillors Morrison and Woodward had to say about, let's look at this at another time. You know, you mentioned if we were talking about your dog. Well, we could be talking about your dog. But you know what? It's not your dog that's the problem. It's the owner. And that's where we get into, we tend to forget about this as, what if you get a bad rabbit owner? What if you get a bad, you know what I'm saying? It's not the animal's fault. I don't have a problem with any animal. I'll tell you what I have a problem with. Some of the animal owners. Mm-hmm. Now, unless we're willing to put a bylaw in place for that, which I don't think we are, we need to deal with what we've got here. And unfortunately, I see everything here, and I think that's lovely what she's doing. I drove down the alley today. I'm familiar with that alley. I grew up right there. But at the end of the day, we have a bylaw. The law is being broken. If somebody hadn't have complained, we wouldn't even be talking about this tonight. But unfortunately, we've had a complaint brought forward. We have to deal with it, and I'd like to deal with that. Thank you.
Okay, unless there's something new to add here, Councillor Lockenberg, I'll give you the last kick at the cat, and then we'll be calling the question. I'll have you read out the motion again.
Well, just for clarity, we're going to the second question after this?
Yeah.
Right, oh yeah, we're going to the second question.
So I think this is new. It's that I didn't know that rabbits weren't a part of the bylaw. Like if a friend came across and they had a rabbit, I'd be like, oh, you have a nice rabbit. I wouldn't have known. And I'm a counselor. And so I'm imagining there's probably a lot of people out there who wouldn't have known that either. Went to the pet store, bought a rabbit, brought it home, developed a bond with it, and then discover maybe from the complaint of a neighbor that they can't do it. That's, to me, that's the reason why we have exemptions, for those circumstances where you just couldn't know. The logic itself wasn't sound. And then so you know that you're probably going to change it, so you make an exemption, or you just defer it to staff. I love Councillor Morrison's idea, and then you deal with it and clean it up when you get to, as opposed to.
I think you have to make a decision if you're gonna give an exemption or not.
But no, we would. Okay, well, even in that case, I think the idea of broadening the definition of a pet is something we have to do, because I know so many people who have pet fish. Speaking of what we're going to unlock, what if somebody hears this and be like, I really don't like my neighbor, and they've got fish, or they've got a tarantula, or they've got a whatever pet that people in this town have. Are they going to come forward and complain like, hey, your tarantula is not part of the animal control bylaw? It's not a cat or a dog, it's a pet, and you can't have tarantulas. I could see that in the reverse happening as well.
I have looked at the bylaw very closely before, and it specifically names these animals. That's why this is before us, because rabbits is in there as one of the prohibited animals. So we don't say what you are. We say what you're allowed, but then there's this big gap.
That's fine, but I think my point remains, which is nobody in this town, I'm sure, knows that they couldn't have a pet rabbit. It just seems like a pet rabbit is just like having a pet dog or a cat.
Yeah.
And so now that you've got one, and then you discover because of a complaint of a neighbor that you can't have that rabbit anymore, and you've developed a bond with the rabbit, it seems cruel if we're like, oh, well, that's kind of a mistake in the bylaw, we're gonna clean it up in 6 months, and then you've, in the meantime, had to get rid of your pet that you've developed a bond with. It seems, like I said, cruel, and it seems like something we should definitely come back and revisit, develop a policy that's more sound, and in the meantime, you know, knowing that that's coming, we should make the exemption for this, this person. I just, it's cruel to do it otherwise, I think. Anyways, I got a soft spot for pets, I guess.
Just for clarity, can we not refer?
I think we need to make a decision
The request
on
is
this,
for the bylaw exemption.
because if you're referring, you know.
Oh,
you
we can,
still
also,
have-
you can't refer because it's not gonna come back with anything different.
Right.
That's why. Thank you for the clarity.
And they're still,
It'll come back the same way,
you're still
unless
not in
you're,
compliance with the bylaw. You got your bylaw officers that are kind of, what do we do now? Because, we're supposed to be enforcing council's bylaw. You know, we created some room so that council could look at this and decide whether we wanted to, provide an exemption. We just need clarity what exemption you're providing.
Yeah.
Is that, 'cause like I said, the other ones are 4-2. Is this 4-3 and that's it? Or when there's
5.
10 next time, these bylaws are supposed to say no, have 3. So clarity would be helpful for staff.
I
So
didn't know
you're-
it.
So the motion on the table is.
I mean,
So right now, if you remove rabbits from a prohibited animal in the current bylaw, they'd be allowed to have 2.
Right, not
If we
3.
didn't have a cat and a dog.
well, no, the motion on the table is that council approves the request by Miss Andrea Levin for an exemption from the Animal Regulation and Control Bylaw number 2333 in order to harbor rabbits within the city. Do you want me to say in order to harbor,
2 rabbits, whatever.
well, how many rabbits are there right now? 3. So in order to harbor 3 rabbits within the city?
Because the exemption would be,
And the breeding and the, yeah, capped at 3 and that they're not allowed to breed, I guess would be.
Yeah, and the recommendation from staff is with, it's got the fence and the electric fence as well.
Well, no, the recommendation from staff was that we deny.
Deny,
Well, there's
The
2
options and your
options, I should say.
alternatives. Right, okay.
Recommendations,
there's an
2
option there as well.
Then the fence will
Well-
have to go up. There's more steps if you approve. Based on recommendations that came from other members like Wild Safe and whatever about the electric fence. So I mean, there's,
Okay.
when you, like it.
Can I make an amendment to my motion then? Okay, so,
So are you looking at the options and alternatives there
Yeah.
that sort of fits what
Yeah.
staffs think may be workable?
yeah.
Okay,
So, in order to harbor 3 rabbits within the city, subject to the conditions, including that an electric fence be installed around the rabbit area, the number of rabbits be capped at 3, that the rabbits no longer be allowed to breed, and that the rabbit feed be kept indoors. So we don't need to have the 3 on the first one because we have it on the second part, which is directly read from the options and alternatives.
so who's gonna tell the rabbits they can't breed?
Just get all females or all males,
So they know
Yeah.
that.
probably all females. They won't fight.
Okay, so fair enough.
Do you second that?
A second, yep.
You're okay with that? That's now the motion on the floor.
That is now the motion on the floor.
Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder, and unless there's something new you want to add to this conversation? I see Councilor Morrison going through it. You okay with that?
Oh, I just was reading the options. I just wanted to read it again, so.
Do you want us to read that?
Sure. Thank you.
So do we need to vote down the first one, or are we okay? Just, that's a friendly amendment as far as you
this
go?
was
Yeah.
conditions that
Yeah.
we felt should be put on this if you were gonna provide this.
So we're
exemption.
providing the exemption with these conditions.
Yes. Yeah.
We're saying?
That's correct.
Right.
The motion, as amended by Councillor Anderson reads, that council approves the request from Ms. Levin for an exemption from the Animal Regulation and Control Bylaw number 2333 in order to harbor rabbits in the city subject to the following conditions. That only 3 rabbits may be harbored, that the rabbit area is enclosed by an electric fence, that the rabbit not be allowed to breed, and that the rabbit feed be kept indoors.
Okay, that was what we got, okay? Okay, I'm gonna call the question, all in favor? Opposed? What are you voting for or against? You're for, obviously.
Yeah,
You're voting for?
yeah,
Okay. All in favor again?
sorry.
I didn't see your hand, I'm sorry. So we had yourself, and Councillor Anderson, Councillor Page, and Councillor Lockenberg. Approved,
Thank you.
thank you. Now,
Alright. And then, so we have the second motion that was split off, so that, that staff be directed to revise the animal regulations and control bylaw number 2333 to allow the safe harboring of hens, bees, and rabbits, and bring it back to council for consideration no later than March 2021.
And do you wanna restrict it to those three animals, or?
I think, I mean, if staff finds like we should include llamas, like I think that I would at least like to see those included. If there are other animals that, you know, koi fish in a pond, I don't know where, you know.
Ducks and rabbits?
Yeah.
I think, if I may.
yeah,
I wonder if maybe the direction wants to be how one would go about evaluating a new animal that had not been evaluated before. Like, would there be an ability to put a framework in to say, we haven't considered the genetically modified glow-in-the-dark piglets from China? Might happen in 20 years. So here's how we would go through the steps of evaluating that animal versus something else. So that at least there's a framework left behind on how we would ask, is this inhibiting, is this a high conflict animal with the neighbors? Is it a predator attractant? Can it escape a lot? You know, I would think maybe we'd want that framework set up. What would be the conditions of approval of a not considered animal?
And maybe you don't name animals who have criteria, as opposed to, you know, if it provides food, whatever, the criteria that.
so we're having the discussion here that we probably should be having at a different time
Yeah.
about what should be in it, so we're asking staff to review this. Councillor Morrison.
Okay, so, not really keen on this, but more just in terms of process. Given now that we've sort of thrown rabbits into this thing already, and we're trying to distinguish, and I would have to say I agree with city manager in terms of rabbits versus food versus whatever, even if people do have pet chickens, is that should we not actually be looking at just writing a new bylaw instead of trying to mold and manipulate this one so that we actually have some clear process of pet versus whatever, and that if somebody gets a llama and it's their pet, then we will go back to 2333. But going forward, seeing how we don't have anything that deals with bees and chickens, that actually should be its own bylaw. Because I know in a number of areas, the bylaws were written separately. They weren't amalgamated into the animal bylaw issues in other jurisdictions that have these bylaws and have allowed bees and hens and stuff. So I'm just sort of thinking that, you know, if we're gonna go down this road at some point, I think it should be, from a process and policy thing, it should be its own bylaw for these other animals or food products, or
Maybe it's just more general that, yeah, staff to do research on animals that promote food security or something to that effect, and that's just a bit more open-ended, and you know, we may come up with the best bylaw out there, and like I said, maybe you don't want to name individual animals, and
I just think they need to be separate.
just work more on criteria of what would be.
So that makes a lot of sense. What bothers me about this is we do a priority list and now we throw this in, right? So we need to, like, either we're, like, why do we do these workshops? Why do we have priority lists and, you know, we're just waking up one day and boom, we're doing bees and ducks and elephants. Like, it just makes no sense to me. Now we need to discuss what comes out of the list. That's the challenge I've got with it, right?
We could add it to our quarterly, situation where, you know, council will then have an opportunity to kind of workshop and look at our their strategic priorities and figure out if something comes off and one of these slips in. So it
Yeah.
could just be added to that list. The resolution could be for that, and then we can talk about it.
I think that's fair to everybody around the table, because, you know, to be honest with you, I've got a half a dozen things right here that I've parked, because we have a list. You know, I could easily, as the mayor, throw them out on the table, bang, at 7:02 at night in the council meeting.
Well, I mean, you did throw one on the table. You have a notice of motion that we're going to be reviewing the handling.
Which we
These
talked about
notices.
earlier tonight, and we probably aren't, so we've already
Okay.
talked about that, right? So,
I'm just saying that, I mean, things
Yeah.
do come up sometimes.
things do come up, exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
and, those are, you know, that's just my challenge with it, right? You know,
Well, I
then,
think,
then
like I said,
maybe that should be a part of the list too, does that go in and something else comes out?
Well, I do think, you know, there's definitely some expertise on the food security piece, and having them involved in the process of where you can make the biggest bang for the buck, I think that would be, you know, valuable, certainly for us trying to do something on this area. Yeah, I
Councillor,
just probably keep it more open-ended at this stage.
I would just say on the food security piece that, you know, the iron is hot right now. We have a lot of connections we've made. We have a a markets committee. We've made connections through that with people who've been in this field for decades. So, you know, now would be a great time in some ways to move this forward, reach out to those people. They probably have a plethora of information that we don't have to research, and they just know. So I think that it would be, yeah, this would be a good time, especially with COVID and all the concerns about the food system stability. So I would just say I would support moving this food security piece along at this point.
Councillor Lachtenberg,
Do we have point of order or question, I guess, do we have a motion on the table right now, or?
Yeah.
yeah. We do.
So we
You
brought
wanna
this,
reread it to Sarah, please? Or Gabe, you can read it out if you wish.
is it the one that's in the email? Cause you don't have to read it.
Yeah, well, for the.
Go ahead, for everybody's
Second one.
benefit.
Okay,
That's
if you wanna
staff
read it again.
directed to revise the animal regulation and control bylaw number 2333 to allow the safe harboring of hens, bees, and rabbits, and bring it back to council consideration no later than March 2021.
Okay, thank you. So then, again, this comes back to my question, and I think I'm with Councillor Woodward, Councillor Morrison, and the mayor on this, that I would, maybe to you, Councillor Anderson, what would you remove from our action priority list to elevate this one? Because it's going to clearly take staff time. What you're saying is, you want to direct staff to revise the animal regulation and control bylaw, which means they're going to come back with a complete bylaw. Like, that's, writing a bylaw is a pretty big deal. So do you,
You know what? I haven't specifically considered what I'd like to see taken off of the list. You know, and we see that these priorities are shuffled on a regular basis, and I do agree with Councillor Woodward that, you know, this is pretty timely. I think that we can also, you know, I feel like if we don't actually make this move tonight, we are not going to see hens, bees, or rabbits allowed in the city sort of within any reasonable time frame. And I have spoken to, you know, the policy expert, you know, in terms of food is Abra in our region, and when I've spoken with her about the hens, she was completely in support of it, and she thought it was kind of ridiculous that we haven't already gone there. And so, you know, I do think that, you know, sometimes I think moving these things along, you know, when, you know, in a timely fashion, I mean, and I know you think like, okay, a few eggs, like, you know, how does that build food security? But what it ends up doing is it ends up enabling people to have different options for them and their families. And, you know, like, yeah, is this gonna, you know, solve the food crisis, like a food crisis? Of course not. But it gives people some flexibility where otherwise that flexibility doesn't exist. And so I do, you know, I would like to see this move forward.
okay, then, so to respond to that, I was, at Climate Caucus, we had an entire working group and
So
workshop
hang on,
related
just
to-
for a second, excuse me.
Yeah,
So, I don't want us to be having the debate here tonight about the bylaw. So that's really what we're having.
But this would be my point, is that that's what we have to do, because the way this resolution is read, we're now gonna be directing staff to go and write the bylaw and then bring it back to us, for consideration.
But we'd have to approve it.
We'd have to approve the bylaw, but I'm thinking
Do the
about
work
the
beforehand.
allocation of resources, and I don't know what we need to take off the priority list. 'Cause
Oh, I
I'd be-
understand where you're going, sorry.
Yeah,
I
'cause
beg
I've
your
been
pardon.
thinking
Okay.
myself about, what am I gonna remove, given that Kate's gonna be bringing back our climate action plan and the scope of that? And I'm thinking, okay, given, and we've talked about this, what are our staff capacity, given what we know is coming and the fact that we're already stretched right now? And I wanted to see this, like, in our next climate workshop, we would start to talk about that. Be like, okay, what are the priorities from an adaptation and a mitigation side? Because I don't know, and then to be voting on what to do with staff resources at a time when I think it's gonna take away from some other important things, I don't have the answers to that. So I just feel it's great, let's move it forward, food security is super important. Is this the priority? Maybe, but I don't know. So I just would love to see it as a part, let's add it to our workshop, which we're gonna have with Kate soon.
She's, looking at, beginning of September to try to do that one.
Yeah. I hear you about feeling like we're not gonna get this, like, if we don't seize the moment, it's not gonna happen. But that's the way I feel about 8 other priorities in our climate change plan that's coming down the pike. And so I could totally see a situation where staff says, well, you want us to do this thing on retrofitting or on our active transportation plan? Well, we can't, because we're focusing on this over here. So, anyways.
Councillor Page.
It's my understanding in the history that there has been, at least on the hen side, bylaws brought before council before, at least a decade ago, so probably worth reconsidering. So I think there's some stuff on the shelf
I don't
that,
think they ever got to, I think the same thing, that groups brought model bylaws forward. They
Okay.
never ended up.
they weren't staff driven.
No, I think the council at the time asked staff to look at it, much like you're asking today, and we ended up with an illness in that case, that's why that got delayed. So staff did not write any bylaws at that stage, but they had sample bylaws from others at that same time.
Okay.
So. Yeah, I don't think anything we'll do tonight will necessarily delay this. I think all we're saying is ultimately where should it be broader, narrower? Where does it fit in that whole food security strategy? Maybe it is number 1. Maybe it's number 5. So that's all we're suggesting. We can certainly talk about it in the workshop. I know Kate's got 268 potential items, and we're trying to narrow that into something that's doable.
Remember, we put a freeze on hiring.
And I don't recall if this is, I know food security is, I don't know where, I assume this is one part of that. So I think it will be on a larger list for sure. So this one you could refer.
So, one more quick question,
Yeah.
or it's just a question. The one pushback that we heard over and over again about backyard chickens, prior to being all for it, was wild safe and their concerns. Can we get them in to, assuming this doesn't pass, assuming we vote it down, can we get them in to talk about this? Because it seems like that's one of the only barriers to backyard chickens, so.
Okay, Councillor Page.
I just want to respond to Councillor Lautenberg's comment. I can't remember what meeting it was at this point, but at some point in the first year, we did have a meeting with the liaison from WildSafe with David, and the position of WildSafe is that they're not against chickens, that they're mitigating habitat factors you can deal with, that there are risks like anything else, and electric fencing, you can deal with them. So that's from the organization side. But I think like with anything, there's going to be, like with rabbits, you can probably want to say that you have to have at least 3, because socially they probably need at least 3, right? As opposed to just 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Each animal is going to have its own requirements, and you have to put that into consideration,
Right.
right?
So I guess my question then would be, if we do add this to any upcoming workshop that we have, it would be great to have the people there that can speak to these things. Because again, like I was gonna say, I was in a workshop just last week on backyard chickens, interestingly. Our breakout group was focused on backyard chickens. There's a lot of information there that I didn't know, including the idea of doing a community scale backyard chickens as opposed to these isolated ones around the neighborhood. Never heard of it, but that kind of expertise, like maybe some, like Abra or somebody who knows this kind of thing to come.
Chickens in the park, I love.
Yeah, down at Lakeside, big chicken farm down at Lakeside.
So what are we gonna do here? We have to move forward here.
Yeah, we need to move forward. We've been an hour here on ducks and chickens and rabbit. $50 million budget.
Vote on it, or amend it, I guess.
Well, I think we need to vote on the motion that's on the table, and if there's, from a process perspective.
Read it out again, please, Gabriel, so everybody's clear.
The motion on the table would like Councilor Anderson is that staff be directed to revise the Animal Regulation and Control Bylaw number 2333 to allow the safe harboring of hens, bees, and rabbits, and bring it back to council for consideration no later than March 2021.
Okay, I'm gonna call,
I'd like to move a friendly amendment, if I may.
well, that would only be friendly if
If she agree, if Councillor Anderson agrees.
Just move an amendment.
Move an amendment, okay.
Friendly amendments.
And you'll decide if it's friendly or not. Which is to defer this to our workshop, add it to our workshop agenda. 'Cause I think it's really a conversation worth having, just not without any context or background.
so now we need a seconder for the amendment.
And that's not an amendment, that's a motion to refer.
That's a different.
Is that what you're saying, refer it?
It was worth a try.
Okay, motion to
No,
refer.
you can refer. That's legitimate.
Yeah.
You need a second refer.
Oh, okay.
Need a seconder,
I'll second that.
okay. All in favor?
This is the referral?
Referral, yeah. Yeah. Carried, thank you. Onward and upward. The motion's on the floor goes with that, right? It's referral. The motion that's on the floor goes with the referral, yeah.
We'll make sure.
Thank you.
Can we take a little recess for Jesse, or you just?
Hang on, Councillor Woodward just went to the washroom, so I'm gonna take a moment here. Thank you. You don't have to stick around. It can be boring as heck sometimes. Thanks anyway for coming, yeah.
I feel like you guys deserve like applause when the drilling session's happening.
We will accept
Aren't you glad you're
interpretive
next?
dance,
It's great. I can stay for
a cultural expression.
It's like we have to have the heckling and the whatever piped in
excuse
like
me.
a hockey game.
But it's just like the crowd noise just playing in the
We can always add it to the video after. We can put a laugh track on.
I'm gonna do that right now, actually.
Oh, I gotta give you a tip. Next time you get on the agenda,
Yes.
talk to Sarah, say, Sarah, could you put me at the front if possible?
Absolutely. No, I miss you guys. I
That's
haven't been here since COVID happened, so, and I was coming like every other meeting.
I know.
It's been a while.
That's true, yeah, I
I've
know,
been
but
watching
you had a big weekend, or big week, or whatever you wanna call it, but you,
No kidding.
Yeah.
It's true, it was big.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
okay.
Learning curve.
Thanks, Councillor Woodward, and onward and upward. With the green light here. Rev up your engines. All right, we're on to Nelson District Arts Council request, funding request. Nelson District Arts Council has hosted the Nelson International Mural Festival for over 2 years, 2018 and 2019, and is doing so again this year, which they've just done. They hope to continue the initiative in 2021 and is requesting funding from the city to further support its application to Canada Council grant this August. Nelson District Arts Council is requesting the city contribute, not donate, contribute $25,000 to the 2021 Nelson International Mural
I'll
Festival.
move the
I'll second that.
Like stereo.
The number one.
Moved by
approving the
Councillor
funding.
Lochtenberg, second by Councillor Morrison. God, I wish I was that popular. That the city provides a grant for $25,000 to the Nelson District Arts Council for the purpose of holding the Mural Festival in 2021, with funding to be provided through the downtown reserve. All in favor? Done, you can go home. Thank you very much.
Thanks, team.
Thanks for all your good work.
Thanks, Sydney.
Murals are awesome.
We appreciate it. The staff will have jobs next year, so thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's great. Thank you. Take
We
care.
appreciate your having a job.
And I
Yeah.
love the mask too.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
You guys need city council masks.
Allward and up, yeah, I know you're talking.
Brandon.
Looks like the
Procedure
logo.
bylaw 3491, 2020, council is requested to pass first and second and third reading of council procedure bylaw, number 3491, 2020, which incorporates most of the changes previously presented to council and addresses a number of housekeeping issues found in the current procedures bylaw.
I'll move the first and second reading.
Councillor Morrison, is
Second.
seconder, please. Councillor Renwick. You have a question, Councillor Page?
I do.
Okay. Anything from the mover or the seconder? No?
No, I'm happy with where the staff is in here.
All right, Councillor Page.
I don't mean to do this to everyone, but
But I'm
I've
gonna do
looked through the bylaw and I honestly feel like I just want to sit with it for another month. Like, this is our procedural bylaw.
Go ahead.
This is our procedural bylaw, and I think unlike some of the other ones, I really want to spend more time before we change it, kind of contemplating it. And it's obviously at the pleasure of the rest of council, but I would really appreciate if we referred this to our next business meeting.
Okay, so we have a mover.
As the mover, just in terms, I'll defer to Corporate Officer Winton, but I think that we could actually move not only this first recommendation and the second recommendation, and then we still have a month to muse on it before we go to final reading, so there would be no reason to delay at least moving first and second reading at this point, as far as I'm aware.
You could do that,
Yeah.
or you could refer it to a later time, to another meeting.
It's still gonna come back at a later meeting. We're not finishing it off
No,
today, so.
fair. Then that's fine with me.
Yeah, because I think
Thank you.
part of it, there are some problems with the current one. I'm trying to rectify in this as well as getting some better clarity on some things. So please,
Yeah, I'm happy to move it a little bit and just slow it down a little bit. I just want a little bit more time with it.
Okay. We've had it for what, a month now?
Well, but I mean, we can do at least
first,
one,
second,
and we
yeah.
can do one or two,
Yeah.
and he still has a month.
Absolutely, so that
So-
gives you 2 months. Okay, very good. All in favor? Carried, thanks very much. Okay, waste management, wildlife. Okay, changes are required to Recycle BC resulted in the elimination of the plastic blue bags for recycling collection on July 1st, 2020. As a replacement, the city provides residential households with a reusable plastic blue bin to hold recyclables for collection. The Waste Management and Wildlife Attractant Bylaw now requires an amendment in order to reflect the changes, and council is now asked to pass the first of 3 readings for the proposed bylaw amendment.
Okay.
Moved.
Sorry.
Moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Morrison, that the Waste Management Wildlife Attractant Bylaw number 3504 2020 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. All in favor? Thank you. Number 2, that the Waste Management Wildlife Attractant Amendment Bylaw number 3504 2020 be read a third time by title only. Moved by Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Lochtenberg. Questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you.
So, point of order, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Could we please go back to bylaw 9A so we can pass the third reading? That still gives Councillor Page over a month or longer before this comes back onto the docket to be passed for final reading.
if you do it that way and there is change, then you have to
Another month.
rescind the third
Okay,
reading.
okay, that's fine. Thank you for the clarity, because nobody clarified that before. So I appreciate that, and people that are listening probably appreciate
Good,
that.
it doesn't hurt to
Thank
ask the
you.
question though, so everybody's on top of it. That's good, thank you. All right, next is the Fall Street Closure Bylaw 3503 2020. At Council June the 1st, where are we here? Oh, yeah. Council passed a resolution approving the permanent closure of a portion of Fall Street Lane roadway along the east property line of 520 Fall Street in order to allow for a portion of the roadway to be transferred to the property owner. In order to facilitate the transfer, a portion of Front Street Lane roadway must be permanently closed by bylaw. Fall Street Road Closure Bylaw number 3503/2020 is now presented for adoption. And in front of you, council, there is a recommendation, and there's always options and alternatives on every one of these. So need a mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move it, and then I have a question.
No problem. Second by councillor Page. Question. Councillor
So,
Morrison.
I'm just under the analysis, and I'm just wondering if the wrong street got put in there, but
I think so.
perhaps Mr. Toom could address the issue of, because I read this, and then I looked at the map, and then I read it again, and I'm reading, this is being done in order to facilitate the transfer of a portion of the Front Street Lane Road. Should that not be
Fall Street.
Fall Street.
Fall Street?
That should be Fall Street, and I'll take responsibility for that one.
Thank you.
I wrote that part.
Oh,
My
okay,
mistake.
okay,
Apologies.
sorry, just as long as,
Yeah.
I mean, that's not the bylaw, but it's just like, okay, Front Street, Fall Street, we are like way on two parts of different from town.
Having said that, the resolution we're passing is for fall, so that's clear.
Yeah, so that's
thanks
clear. I
for that.
just-
Thank you.
Because you also just read it out, and that's exactly what you read, I'm just, still not hearing it correctly. Okay,
Okay,
I moved
question.
it, I'm good with it.
and we have a seconder, all in favor? Carried, thanks very much.
Corner lots?
Yeah, those corner lots every time.
Well, we've been doing them on Front Street and Fall Street, so I.
At the same time.
Yeah.
Apologies.
It's okay.
No problem. This is a zoning amendment. Development Services is proposing an amendment to the zoning bylaw to address a number of housekeeping amendments, conditional permission to illuminate buildings, facades, and more nuanced definition of secondary suite ready, clearer and more restrictive regulations on shipping containers, and redefine and prohibit portable vehicle shelters, and accommodating amendment to the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw proposed for consistencies with the zoning bylaw with respect to portable vehicle shelters. Council is now asked to adopt both the zoning amendment bylaw 3496/2020 and the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw 3500/2020. So there'd be two here, is that right? That the zoning amendment bylaw is the first one, and that the bylaw notice enforcement, number 2. So we have 1 and 2. Mover and a seconder. Moved by councillor Page, second by councillor Morrison. Any questions? Hearing none. All in favor of that the zoning amendment
We're
bylaw
done.
number? Good,
No
done.
more vehicle shelters.
Is that what we passed?
We just passed one.
Okay, number 1, and the next one is the bylaw notice enforcement amendment, portable vehicle shelters, bylaw number 3520, be finally adopted. Mover and the seconder, councillor Renwick, councillor Page, second. Questions or comments? All in favor? Carried, thanks very much.
We'll make sure we get things out to retailers and the public that they should know that those are not allowed to be in the city proper.
Okay, there is a grandfather clause there, though, for some of the ones that are
Yeah.
in existence, right? If they're compliant,
They have to be cited.
cited properly. So just so we're clear, there's a grandfather piece in there, if you read through it, I'm sure
Yep.
you did, but they have to be cited properly
Yeah.
on the property.
Yep.
And believe me, there's a few of them that aren't. All right, Lake Street, and this is for a portion of Lake Street disposition of land. And 2018 Development Services received a road closure application jointly submitted by the owner of 502 Front Street, 509 Lake Street, 511 Lake Street, and 520 Front Street. Now the owners of 520 Front Street would like to proceed to purchase a portion of Lake Street right-of-way. In order to facilitate the sale, council is being asked to approve the permanent closure of a portion of Lake Street roadway along the south property line, 520 Front Street. And there's a report there. We've been through most of this before, but there's also a recommendation from staff.
I'll move the recommendation.
You're moving the council approve the permanent closure of a portion of Lake Street roadway as per the attached map along the south property line of Lot 3, Block 62A, Plan NEP 9500, District Lot 95, Land District 26, 520 Front Street for the potential sale to the owner of 520 Front Street, subject to the following conditions: that the land be sold on the condition that a building footprint be expanded into the closed portion of the right-of-way, with construction to commence within 2 years of the sale of the land, and construction completed within 5 years of the sale of the land, and that the owner be responsible to satisfy the city for legal survey and registration of plans and land title office, permanent closure of the roadway along the south frontage of 520 Front Street. That's what was moved, that's what was seconded. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you, that'd be great to expand that business and get those tires off the side of the road. Exactly. Okay, and the next one is pretty straightforward also, but maybe not. And that's a appointment of official officers authorizing a designated staff. And this is for council is required to appoint an approving officer for the municipality, and I won't go through the rigmarole, but it's pretty straightforward. And there's a recommendation that the senior planner, two people here have been recommended to be appointed to that position. Moved by Councillor Anderson and second by Councillor Woodward. Questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor? Thank you. Natalie and Sebastian, congratulations, and look forward to you continuing doing some good work for us.
I think they'd be.
You'd almost think they'd be here to celebrate.
Oh, they're already out
Yeah,
there.
right.
Oh, they're working. Good. Working late.
Thanks for looking after your department.
Yeah, attaboy, Alex.
And he's the only one without signing authority, but.
Yeah, Alex, you're getting all the glamour for this, Alex.
Good
Okay.
night, Alex.
So, and the next one is the annual report, and so we're gonna have a few people probably speak to this, and Councillor Woodward had some really good comments earlier on tonight when we were talking. And we have to do this as compliant with the community charter, so Colin is the man that's gonna give us a little bit of an overview of our annual report, which is missing the mayor's message, but oh well, what the heck. What, three,
there.
four of them before, or what?
Isn't it
Six?
there?
Oh, really?
It's there.
Oh, it's there.
There.
Oh, is it?
Right.
Mhm.
7, yeah.
Yeah, no, you got it in there, Sarah? Yeah, way to go.
It was in there and then it wasn't, and then it was.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess I'm just gonna speak a little bit to it.
Who the threw you off?
I think the council has it, but it's such a fantastic document. The hard part sometimes is that when it comes out, so here we are, we're in August. Usually, because of COVID, I know that there's limits have been extended. Usually we would have this into you by the end of June, but still even at the end of June, you're 6 months into the new year. But I think it's really valuable for council, it's really valuable for staff, and it's really important for the community to see all that was accomplished in 2019. Because I think that we move at such a breakneck speed, we don't tend to stop, take a look, and really say, you know what, we do a lot of good work here. We do a lot as compared to any small city. There really is not one that really compares to the departments for a community our size. All the involvements we have, whether it's obviously having Nelson Hydro, our eco-safe programs, paid fire, paid police, all of those sorts of departments, own sewage treatment. We do so much of our own capital work. And again, so it's just really valuable. I think it's, when people have the chance, and just you said, even you look at the photos sometimes of again, what we've had, whether or not it's the holy lighting on Baker Street, again, the work that's gone on as far as getting our meters in place, the EOC planning that's in place. I know that some of these sort of blend over the year as we've got them in there, but I think it's just really valuable to see how much we have progressed.
And who knew you were gonna trigger a pandemic?
Yeah, exactly.
But again, I think it's just really valuable for council as well when the naysayers or people are asking what's happening at the city, and you actually pass over the document and say, you know what, have you looked at our annual report and see what we've done. As far as the financial officer's report, 2019 was a successful year. We certainly had a lot of building. Again, kind of hard not to see what's happened on Hall Street there. We see what's happening over at Creedy Quarter from the Dairy Queen. a lot of that has, and again, just the infill lots that's happening, the building that's going on, it's significant, but that drove a lot of building permit revenue. We also saw, an increase in our parking meter revenue, which doesn't surprise people in 2019 as compared to what we had budgeted and what we had expected. On the connection charge, especially these large buildings that go in that are going to be part of our water and sewer system, they have significant connection fees, but that's because they're now joining a system that's already been invested in and will be continued to be invested in. So that's why some of the revenue numbers are higher than what we had planned, and some of the reasons also for that would be, for example, we took on the TELUS fiber project because we own our hydro poles here, and TELUS needs to come to us, which is a bit of a different than it is in other communities. But in 2019, there was $1 million worth of that project that was done, and we replaced a lot of our poles throughout the city. Again, a big part of it. And then just in the last part is just some of the statistical pieces that go on, just kind of showing, our revenues. We are, I think, as a group and as council here and councils in past, really good stewards of the money that are provided. We've had, in my opinion, minimal tax increases, inflationary related. We tend to be very proactive and entrepreneurial in how we raise our funds, and that's a good thing when you get a year like 2019, and that's helped us in our bottom line, put some money into surplus because we were more successful than we had expected, which again helps us, even though it hurts us in a 2020 year of a pandemic, when all of a sudden you get shut down on your parking meter revenue, your campground revenue, your youth center revenue. But because you were successful in the past, you've got a bit of a cushion in your reserve that you can draw on that in a time like this and be able to help out our community and give breaks to our businesses and have sidewalks, free rentals, and let them try to get on their feet. And obviously, as you can see in the last couple of months here, as the pandemic has still been going on, but we've been successful in our area of, I think, being safe and seem to have a bit of a bubble around us for not having too many cases in the area. And again, see, yes, hit would you like, but also just the success that we are seeing for our restaurateurs, our hoteliers, extremely valuable at this point in time. So again, I think that I'd be remiss though if I didn't speak about the annual report, because I get to talk to it here, but Chris Jury has dropped, he as our deputy CFO, he's a major component in putting this all together. Obviously, Ginger Lester is also another person really valuable in publishing, getting the messages that we need to have from the mayor and the CAO and other staff, and also Sonia Martineau and our from Sarah's staff there that really puts this document together in all those fine pieces and making sure that as much as possible we've made all the included the mayor's report, that we've did the best grammar and spelling as possible. So those are all key components of putting this document together. So I just really want to put a shout out to them, because behind the scenes they are the ones that really put this great document together. And I would take any questions that council may have.
Councillor Woodward.
I don't have a question, but I did want to say that when I looked through this document, what I thought was healthy was that we have done so many different things in so many different areas. So I feel like anybody could say to the city, what have you done? And we can say we've actually done a really good spread of work and investment, which I think is a good sign of a healthy community and a good working staff at the city. Not too much focus on one area, but really trying to get that pie, everyone gets a piece. And I feel like in this document really shows that. Plus, I think also we've really worked on those core services, like having the Emergency Operations Center was really super important because of pandemic, but also getting the infrastructure in, like the water mains. I mean, these are really core pieces. So I just want to congratulate the staff on, I hope we didn't push so hard that it was exhausting, but exciting too. I mean, I know we pushed pretty hard there in the first couple of years, but I feel like we got, as a whole team, we got a lot of stuff done in a great way. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anybody else?
You need support of a council to move these things forward.
Yes. It's amazing. It's actually, it is amazing. Chris, thanks very much for all your good work. We
you,
rarely get to,
Chris.
get to see or visit with you or whatever, but thank you.
I understand you guys are all pretty digital, so you didn't need paper copies, but I do have a few if anybody.
Oh, no, please.
Ah, there you go, see?
I have a collection.
I love to have them laying around the house, to be honest with you,
Yeah,
because you'd be
I have a
surprised how many
collection.
people pick it up and
Yeah.
have a look at it. They don't read the, glance at it and so forth. But, on the same note as Councillor Woodward there, I had an opportunity, I tried to, on occasion, visit the different projects in town, and I called Rob Nystrom one day to go look at the new water main that went up on the rail trail. In fact, I met Councillor Anderson and my mum were up there having a walk that day, and it's just great to be around people like Rob, because, he knows the whole thing from beginning to end. He's helped plan it, and he knows every rock, and he knows the challenge the contractor faced and the successes he had as well. And at the end of the day, it's something that's been talked about for many years, and guess what? It's gonna be, is it hooked up yet? It must be darn close to it, is it? It's pretty close, I'd say, so.
We have some control building,
Yeah.
has to be able to
Yeah, but
get
it's
the
a-
water in
It
first.
was an
before we do it.
amazing project, and congratulations to Rob and his team, and to the contractor as well, Kay's Contracting. They reclaimed that trail and did a wonderful job of fixing it up and leaving it better than it was when they went there. So there's just so many great things happen,
That
and
was a 100% grant funded
project. It's amazing, and I just want to go back to almost the first few weeks that we got together as a council, and I remember, some of our councillors talking about, the environment and climate change and electric vehicles, and there Jody Cayley shows up with the, the electric 4x4 for the parks. Like, stuff happens, our staff do a great job of sort of reacting to council. Sometimes we're not sure if they hear us, but they do hear you, and they care deeply about all of you, and they care that you care about our community, and they want to please you. And these are the kind of reports that clearly demonstrate that our staff listens and they react, and I think they do a marvelous job. And the highway project through town, our guys reacted, and we got all those letdowns for wheelchairs, and they're, all the work that was done to tie in the water systems across Nelson Avenue, crossed by Safeway, and all that happened like as if, it was just happened. Things happen, and we're really proud of all the people that work for us and help put this together and to make us look good. At the end of the day, it's marvelous, the work our police officers and fire department, and, if you get a chance, don't be afraid to stop with in any one of our departments and talk. They're proud of what they do, and they love to show you around, and it's a great place. And this document clearly reflects the quality of the people we have working for us and the community that we live in. It's outstanding. And with that, there's actually a resolution here. That 2019 annual report be accepted and presented to council.
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Morris, second by Councillor Renwick. All in favour? Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is the Sophie report. Do you want to fill in on that one also? Glenn?
Yes,
Lot
Your
of
Worship,
numbers
I
here.
would.
Somebody better grab a hold of it.
Well, the part is that all that work we talked about in the annual report of 2019, we got to pay for it. And you can see that there's both, we've got wages in there, and we've got, the suppliers. And there's rules for this. And the reason that this document is here, it's a requirement across the province for publicly funded entities. So again, this is, your hospitals and your school districts. And so it's not just municipalities, it's the colleges as well. So they all need to report on this. And so the threshold is that for elected officials, we need to report your remuneration and then whatever expenses that you incurred over the year. For staff, it has to be whoever has earned over $75,000, and we also report their expenses. In addition to that, we have to report any vendor that we've engaged with that we've spent over $25,000 with, and there's also a component on that as well with grants that we provided. So in most cases, the documents that are in here from the beginning, just about, the report at the beginning talks about management's report and that we've done this and the work that we provided, and that the audited financial statements, which we did not include in this because it's sort of in the annual report, so it sort of doubles things up. But that they're also part of that report that goes in, and again, these are all held by the province. They have a kind of first of all, they review them all, and then they get back to you if there's any issues. We've never had any problems, but that's sort of that mandate for the city. You know, really a big part of this is transparency. It's government's way of having some transparency. They want to see, is there something amiss, whether or not that's with councillor remuneration or employee remuneration. And they also want to make sure that, you know, for example, if there was $50,000 spent at the Rusty Moose, you know, they would want to know why would that be like that? So we don't have those sorts of concerns. I think that if you take a look at the list of vendors, what I think that you should be proud of as well, and one of the keys where we can, you know, we buy local. So we like to think of that kind of round dollar. So your tax dollars that we collect from our community, they go back into many of the companies that supply our services for us and goods for us, which then allows them to pay their employees good paying wages. So that round dollar effect of, again, user fees, water fees, hydro fees, you know, there's a lot of investment that comes back to the community for the dollars that are collected on behalf of our community.
Thanks, Colin.
Also, again, would be remiss, again, Chris Drury put this together, so being aware that he's the one that painstakingly goes through all of the information and collects it and gathers it and makes sure it's all accurate. So I thank him for that as well.
Thanks, Chris. What are you doing down there?
Yeah, what are you doing?
Those afternoon naps?
Colin's having his cup of coffee, looking over Chris's shoulder.
And so again, I would take any questions that you might have.
The only other thing I'd want to add is, you know, just as the mayor mentioned, a position like Rob Nystrom's to manage the projects we have, lots of local governments really try to, you know,
Skip that
they're
piece,
saving,
yeah.
saving money by using consultants and not having that in-house expertise, but whether it's Nelson Hydro or our other utilities or, you know, Peter Sinstead, you know, that we hired a while ago now on the facilities. Our facilities are going nowhere until we, you know, you put that resource in there. And, you know, it's inevitably the savings is significantly more than the cost of that salary.
Absolutely. Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, if somebody move for seat to the report, move by Councillor Morris, second by Councillor Anderson, all in favour? Good, thanks very much. And next is the,
And maybe next meeting we can invite some of our new folks, new council.
That'd be
Maybe
good.
we'll try to organize something in September of, you know, the wrap up of a number of projects that we've done as well, so.
okay, we're all through those now. Didn't miss anything, no? Reports, information and correspondence.
We have one, Mayor, it's the second quarter financial update.
Oh, I beg your
Yeah,
pardon.
I know, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Oh my God,
2020
what
second quarter,
Chris,
sorry.
did Chris do that one too? Chris?
I helped on this one.
Oh, yes. Anyway, kind of an important document to look at considering what we're going through. And I think some really important documents just even on taxation that we provided. Some of the other ones there, again, both the deputy CFO and I were quite surprised that there wasn't a significant jump in deferments. But there wasn't. Again, which I know at the time when we were having ongoing meetings with the ministry and with our other local municipalities, there had been a lot of, you know, how do you change the date? How do you change the due date for taxes? And the province saying, you know what, there are avenues for the homeowner in particular, but we, you know, they did extend the penalty date for the commercial properties and classes, you know, I think 5 to 8. Another important number there that Chris had investigated was the fact that 3/4 of those that are in Class 6 paid by the due date. So I just really, again, want to thank our commercial community because they did have the ability to withhold for 3 months, keep the money in their banks. But again, I think they're also proud and care about our community, and they did, you know, make those payments. And so that was significant as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
before we move on? Do you have the number of how many residential properties asked for deferment?
It was on the last document.
should
Sorry, I'm just like.
If you go back one, you'll see it.
Yeah.
Go back to the, it was
so
132.
133.
36.
Yeah, well, it's 136 total. So what I thought was interesting too there is that if you've got family, they have a bit more of a different parameter. But I noticed that there was 6 last year. There's only 3 this year. But we did have an uptick of about 4 of those on the regular deferment where you had to be over 55 to be able to and have equity in your home to be able to make that deferment
But
process.
it's up significantly though, Colin, I think.
When
in the
you
last
look,
few years.
absolutely, Mayor.
Yeah,
And that would be consistent with them providing it as an option, in particular to those that are kind of aging in home, I guess you would say, especially as the housing prices. It's not lost on our, council here as well as the community on how high, prices have increased over that time frame. And so knowing that you're in your home and if you have the ability to defer that taxes, the interest rate is not exorbitant when I look at what you are paying, because you are, there's a not paying your taxes, but paying 2% on that number is not. It's not like it's 12 or something that's really exorbitant. So like a 2%. That's for if you're over 55. So that's, I think, one of those drivers, and I think it's an opportunity for the province to allow and assist those people that are likely on fixed income and wanting to stay in their homes. Yes. Councilor Woodward.
Do you, thank you. Do you think that there'll be a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like we'll see another, like there'll be more people asking for deferments because we haven't seen the full exposure of risk because of COVID yet. I mean, we've started, but do you think like 2021 could be more?
I think it could. The other part, again, is, with the pandemic, I expected that we would probably see maybe a little bit of a softening in the market, but that's not what we're seeing. In fact, we're seeing, and part of that, I think, is people saying, hey, Nelson's a pretty fantastic place to live. Can I get out of the Lower Mainland? A lot of jobs are saying, yes, you can work from home. Well, would I want to live in Vancouver, Surrey, if I could live in Nelson? I'm thinking people are probably looking at those opportunities, so that would be part of that, I think, likely driving out prices. But you're right. The one thing though, and depending on who's in here and how these things go on, depending on where taxes are at, if you're able in your fixed income even to kind of continue to pay that, which was what we're seeing, I'm thinking that that would likely continue, that people that have home ownership are going to be able to continue to pay the taxes.
Right.
Yeah. The bigger concern that I have is okay, so we've allowed commercial properties to have a date of September 30th before they pay. Now, things look pretty good, pretty busy out on our streets, and that's great news. However, now you've also, in theory, depending on what the government says, are they going to make it September 30th next year, right? So now you've probably helped out a group, but now do they roll it back to now the penalty date is again down to July 2nd or in that time frame? And does that mean now the commercial owner has nine months to kind of get ready to pay their taxes again? Always remembering that we sort of collect taxes for the year halfway through the year. Right. So we incur, your snow plowing expenses, whatever other, police enforcement, fire enforcement, those sorts of things. And they, we're kind of giving you 6 months and then we ask you to pay the bill. However, I'm not as concerned when I see how many of our, 2/3, actually I think it's in 3/4, have already paid, the commercial properties paid their taxes on time, right? I think it's something that people kind of prepare for, especially if you're in that business, in the commercial business, that you're kind of already there.
Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to speak to a bit was just about your tax comparatives, and probably not a lot of shock here when you see, our pre-authorized payments had stayed pretty steady. We didn't know, even going into 2021 here, as people start to prepaying for next year, what their response would be. And we've had nobody kind of ask for adjustments. In fact, we've had a few more even add on to that list. What we did obviously see was, if you look, a pretty significant increase in the online payments, again, for taxes. The homeowner grant. And so this will be the last time, so council should also be aware of this, is that the province is taking over the homeowner grant. So you will not be dealing with the city anymore to claim your homeowner grant. And my understanding is they are going to have it all online. I'm thinking that may change, just when I think of home ownership, and yes, for me, not an issue. For many, not an issue to go online and claim your homeowner grant. But there will be quite a few that will struggle. So, how do we walk through the group that's maybe not technology strong, and make sure that they're able to get that claim for homeowner grant? But it is interesting is that they're taking that away from us, because one of the things you can see. Yes, sorry.
On that note though, Colin, we do have provincial government downstairs. So if somebody walked in, just used to walking in, they would have an option to talk, get clarity there, wouldn't they?
Great question. I think that we are going to be that conduit of how, like whether or not employee Giacomo Mercedes, I think that we're going to have with a kiosk, so that she may be sitting there on the days, maybe we're not getting your homeowner grant, but you come in, and you may be sitting down with someone and trying to work through the website with them. I think that we would probably end up providing that service, in particular for 2021's homeowner grant. But again, it's kind of interesting when you even see, like, how many people do usually come in. So like even 1,700, over 1,700 in 2019. Now that certainly dropped this year, 1,200, but that's 1,200 people coming in just to claim their homeowner grant. So how this changes and how the province communicates that, I think that it may not be we've got less than 1,200 people showing up. We probably got 1,000 people showing up, or wondering, or trying to figure out how do they go and do this, or how do they do this new way of claiming it.
When you say show up though, people, like you can also just drop it off in the mailbox, right? Like you don't have to have that interaction, right? You're just filling it out.
That's true.
You can drop it off.
That is true. Yeah. But we do have. You would be surprised with how many come in to claim.
You can see in
homeowner
the
grant.
report there.
Well, but again, I think that what Councillor Anderson's saying is, I didn't actually ask that. Chris, do you know on that claims process by City Hall whether or not that would have been those that dropped in the mailbox?
Yeah, so that would have been included in person. If one of our CSRs had to enter it in, whether they're
Right.
standing right in front or they had a piece of paper.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Great
Okay,
question.
yeah. That's a good question.
Any sense of how much people put in the box versus?
Yeah, I couldn't say. It's a great question. Could maybe ask them anecdotally. They probably don't have the numbers, but they might be able to, roughly tell us.
Yeah, some people still like to.
I
so
always-
You have the check and you can
I always come
it's
in.
processed, you got the receipt.
Your driving cost.
I always come in to keep people employed.
That's what you're paying taxes.
Well, and again, the other part, which again spoke to the province confidence, when I see on that particular job, as I kind of just deal with the property taxes, is that we're up 20 people that are on the didn't pay, right? So again, from 177 in 2019 to 197. So it wasn't it hasn't been huge. There is an increase, 11%, but it's not huge. And you can see that the penalty itself, being $60,000 more unpaid on that kind of 11. So those were kind of some property statistics, and I just thought it's really valuable and important, because I know that council frets over, you got a pandemic, how are we helping out our community? We don't want to crush people here. We don't want to be collecting money because they can't pay. And so I think, when I think of all that's happened here, quite a positive sign for our community. And I also then just wanted to again touch base on our second quarter update, and things are trending as we would expect. Again, a couple of highlights there is the investment income has sort of blown the doors off, and we've talked as a group on there's another MFA long-term type of source that we may invest in and pull some money out, because we know that we sort of have an ongoing sort of almost untouched principle that we have when you think about the ebbs and flows that happen inside our reserve funds, that we can kind of park that with something that makes a few basis points more. Again, we have been successful with the bond fund, but I also know that it's already hit the bottom, and they're always turning over, so they have to buy the new bonds, and I know the new bonds aren't coming in, with a really high rate, and so you're not going to have any of that paper capital gain. So I think that it might be wise for us, and we'll kind of deliberate over that on to recognize some of that and then invest invested, so that's.
Pick up a few of those brick shares.
That's right.
Councillor Page, you had a question?
Yeah, on that topic, I guess I'm wondering what your thinking is regarding that current high, because I think there's some expectation in the market that, you know, there's a lot of cash in the democracies flooding into people, people are flooding into the market, but whether or not that holds, we saw quite a precipitous drop before, as COVID was hitting, that slowly climbed back up. I'm just wondering how much we're protecting or how soft we feel this rise is, and what your strategy is around that.
Well, I know that my average interest rate is dropping on the bond fund. I know that because of where it was and because basically at zero for the central banks, and, you know, remembering that in that bond fund, we are in that high quality, we have to be in the high quality. There isn't a lot of room there. So it's not, you can't really get much lower than zero. They could go negative, right? Which again, you might get a little bit more left on the unrecognized gain side. But that's where, when I think about that diversification, we know we've got some in that money market fund. We know that we've got some in the medium bond term fund, and now there's sort of a more another pool that MFA is coming out with. It's a bit longer term. So again, even on the bond fund, it takes some time to turn around a redemption, whereas in this other fund, it would be long. You know, you couldn't just get it out. But we don't need that money per se. If we could drive some extra basis points, that's value to us. So for me, I think we've got too much sitting in that bond fund portfolio right now. And if we could even take half of it, take half of those gains that we've got and put that into something that's going to pay longer term, I think that diversification makes sense. Again, I do this with, you know, conversations with MFA, with staff. This isn't something that for me, again, and remembering, it's not like I'm buying penny stock or anything like that. I got to stay inside that locked in AAA type of, you know, or very high quality products. I'm just seeing that we really have done well, and I just can't see where it can keep, I can't see it producing. Now, I could be wrong, and that's why you would still have half of kind of what I'm thinking would still be in there for part of that. But then we would also kind of take some of the profits and invest it elsewhere.
Okay, so thank you.
So just a
Everybody understands how, you know, those capital gains on bonds work. So if we have a bond at 3% and now the interest rate is 1%, I can sell my bond at a premium because the market is now, I need a 1% return. So, you know, that $1 million bond I sell for 1.2 million, and even though it's paying 3% on 1 million, that's whatever, 1% on 1.2 million. So they're, you know, you give up, you know, the higher interest to realize that.
Money on hand, yeah. Councillor Morris?
So I know I was at some meetings earlier this year where MFA was doing a presentation, and they were talking about the fact that they are speaking with the government in terms of broadening their investment opportunities. And I'm just sort of like, as you talk about not just sort of being in their bond fund and then moving money out of that, I've tried to look for some follow-up on that, but I don't know where they've gotten to and whether or not their board has actually approved or whether or not they've gotten governmental approval to sort of widen out investment opportunities within MFA, which I think, you know, benefits, you know, a city like Nelson that's well-run, and that we can actually park money for a longer period of time, that we can go beyond 5 years knowing that we're not going to particularly, you know, be needing it, and therefore why not capitalize on whatever gains you have. Do you know where MFA is on that? Have they gotten the approval to get that done, or have they gone down that road, or is that they're just chatting about it still?
Yeah, exactly. They haven't come up with any product yet that would be with that. And again, just understanding, so part of what's interesting is that with the MFA and the bond fund is that allowing that to be actively managed seems to allow you know, some things that I couldn't go and buy, like if I wanted to go outside MFA, because you can, I can go to CIBC Wood Gundy, and now I can't, I have to stay within a range of product, but I don't have that active management fees. I'd have to buy a you know, kind of a bond and hold kind of thing, not that kind of trading. So I think that they were trying to, again, obviously there's a lot of pressure with the low rates that have, you know, been value, you know, for being able to earn income. So I think that they were trying to widen it a bit. And again, when they look at some of the active managers, they're saying, well, you know, why can't we have some of that? So I think that that's where Burnaby, I think, was coming in and saying like, hey, what, you know, we should be able to do something else. We've got people on board, right? And not having that and having to stay in MFA. So I think MFA was trying to, I think it's trying to stay current and see is there some other products that we can provide that because they're in MFA, and therefore those municipalities can invest in it. But that's not certainly anything that we've looked at or on that level.
Okay,
no.
and so they haven't gone that road. So just further that, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, this is, I would encourage Councillor Anderson, if she's staying on the regional district, that she should try to get herself a position on with the MFA and then get on the MFA board. I would have to say that there's and no offense to the gentleman in the room, but there's a lack of female influence on the MFA board, and I think that could bring some different light to the board of the MFA. It's missing youth and it's missing women. So
As usual.
as usual. So anyways, just a passing thought, because I know it was on my mind in terms of seeing about whether or not an appointment could be garnered from the RD table. Ron Toyota's been doing a fine job, but he's been there for a number of years, and it would be nice to bring somebody on.
That happens at the UBC.
Someone that happens to be
We can
UCM, yeah.
nominate somebody from here.
Yeah, we could do that too.
Thank you. Let's chat about it
Yeah,
more.
it's a fascinating organization.
Yeah,
It is. It's a
Definitely
special
caught my eye.
organization.
but then I'm the money person.
Yeah, it's a special organization, for sure. A couple more high points. In particular, I think that things have been running smoothly. Again, I will have a better kind of sense here when as we get closer into end of August and into September, but just even the parking meter revenue for July, campground, you know, has been quite successful. So those are hopefully a positive side for us. Transit, I'll be interested in just on what will that look like in school and masks now being mandatory and some of those, you know, will that increase our capacity? What will students look like? I don't know, even for Selkirk College, as far as their numbers go. Again, we have a lot of students in town that ride the bus as well, so it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out here in September and passes and whatnot. Yes, Councilor Woodward.
Oh, go ahead, Councillor Woodward.
I was just wondering if there were any other metrics that we could get, because I'd really be curious to know, you know, I know there was this incredible downturn, right? We all kind of moved through that. But I'm really curious to know, you know, the hotels, I don't know if you can do the retail, but just kind of some other metrics to know where we're at as a town.
And I think that's where Sebastian is working on that information. I did work with Mike Stolte, who was commissioned by the Nelson District Credit Union to kind of do some of them. So I worked with them, amongst others, to try to provide some information. But again, it's almost historical now, which is amazing, but it's like only a few months old, but it's historical. So as we go through the next little while and find out from Sebastian here, get an update, hopefully that information will be forthcoming. Councilor Woodward.
Thank you.
We're trying to get some key businesses to just give us percentages of
Yeah.
sales and percentages of employment as indicators of where they're at.
Because you know, it's this idea of like recovery. You know, how do you judge that? You know, how do you find that place that yes, we're recovering and we're doing well? It'd be really interesting to know that information.
Colin, you okay, Jess?
Oh yeah, thank you.
I noticed here on other revenues, it says other revenue is lower than this time last year, 470,000, but that must have changed, right?
No, actually, great question, Mayor. Last year, so we had two major projects come on. Right now, as we work through, there will be something coming in the future, but one of the biggest ones is the one on Vernon.
Oh, that was just on building
Yeah, so that,
revenues,
again, when
connections.
you see those types of connection fees, if you've got your regular home, we're not gonna see. So we've had a couple of years here of these major buildings. One that we had budgeted for, they are currently trying to work to be within a certain window here. We will know in the next few months whether or not they're gonna move forward or carry on to 2021, but that's a big budgeted amount. So again, it's off of budget because we had expected maybe they would be in, starting their paying their connection fees and that sort of thing. So that's one major one.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple of other things, again, on the, on the expense side, I think we've done quite well. We had already with council worked through, some cutting back on travel and different things. And so obviously that's something that has helped us, but we'd already kind of contained that inside our budget. So that's one of those things that we are seeing that go or stay where it should. One thing I know that staff were very pleased that council had agreed kind of late in the budget cycle there to allow the funding to get the force main sewer underneath underneath the highway, just in time. And again, very grateful to Ministry of Transportation and their staff that they allowed us so many of these, hey, can we get this in, can we get that in? Even some of the work that was done by Rio's spot there, that was opportunity to get a huge building and their leaders from their rain collection to go into stormwater out of sanitary. And because it's so close to our system, to have that opportunity to go in there, and again, Ministry of Transportation giving us permission, not having us make a patch on it, but allowing, because they're coming through to do this, but all the work that we've done on crossing the highway, extremely valuable. But that was one, and the reason I just spoke to that was because, and again, it was pretty cold in that January, February timeframe, but when that force main blew and they had to pump around it, and the cost of repairing just the section that they had, let alone not knowing what kind of condition the pipe is going into the highway, and knowing that they've now got a great updated product that's underneath there, and the highway's now paved. So again, they were very grateful that council had agreed to do that.
And accessible in the future.
Right.
So that was really deep for the system.
Absolutely. And then just on the capital, again, a lot of cleanup kind of going on. And when I say that, just meaning projects getting finished. We got that great bathroom down there. It's quite nice, I like it with the lights and the blue and this, the green, I should say, down there. And that washroom there at the end of Hall Street. So I think that's great that we've now got another new public washroom that's going on there. The
Local BC company.
Yep, out of Vernon, maybe wanting to be here, who knows? Then you've got also that Cottonwood stage. I know that council has been on for a while waiting, and others have been waiting, and it's nice to have that there. It's sort of unfortunate that we're in a situation that we're not going to have a band to listen to out of it this year, but hopefully by next spring we are. So I think that was excellent. A couple of like you're talking about the timeliness of having an EOC up and running, and we did get the generator for the whole building upgraded, so that's great. And we did get a grant because of the EOC funding to help fund for that. Yeah, and I think that's about all that I'll speak to. Again, we've got some more TELUS foreshore work going up the North Shore. So again, new poles going in, but that being funded significantly by TELUS, so working with them again. And the substation down at Lakeside's now been decommissioned, and it's now parking. So again, one of the positive things for that is that the environmental report that we had because of that substation, the best way to actually contain or cap that was to have it paved. So because of where we got with some good pricing on things, we were able to budget to have that taken care of. So it's very helpful for contamination sites there. And again, ongoing, again, fantastic. We've got more funding coming, obviously big chunk for our active transportation. So that's got a big jump compared to, when I think about people coming and saying, hey, where is this at? Council strategic priorities, hey, we need to move this up the chain. Well, not only do we move it up the chain, but now we got money to get some things done. So it's impressive and talks about our work. And also, again, CBT, fantastic organization that has been so supportive of our communities in the basin, and how they've put that money together to help us out with the pier. And so again, there's a lot more in here, and I won't go on. One last one, actually, I will, is the ICI water metering. Been very interesting to see, and to see the data, to see that now we've got almost everybody. So that data is going to be so valuable in a number of different ways. And a lot of it is just on how do we help on areas. We're seeing areas that the system automatically knows. It says there's a backflow preventer missing here, right? And we don't even know that, but we can see on the system that something's not quite right. And so we're able to go and say, hey, you need to get this fixed. Really kind of point out those businesses, and we want to have a liaison to meet up with the ones that we see that have a continuous leak or intermittent leaks, and sort of really wherever we can try to work with them to cut back on our water usage just through loss. which again, certainly is something was a big factor with the previous council and getting all the galvanized out of the, our own water lines. And so now it's kind of working with the, in particular, commercial properties. So I think it's really going to be valuable. And I think as we've had this growth, we're going to see actually our water system getting tight. And when we get to our next when we get into budget here, which is only a few months away for 2021, I actually want to kind of show you, because I think in the past we kind of showed you the reports that kind of show the big leakages. I want to show you some that really can show us now. Like, here's something that's super tight. You can see when they open the door in the morning for whatever they do, when they work for that day, and then you can see when they go home at night and when they're gone for the weekend, the system is tight. And that's where if we can, we want to get our systems to be like that. So.
Colin, that sort of brings to mind something we talked about tonight around the EcoSave program. Like, I mean, if water's sort of lumped into that conversation, you have that data, you can go to people, and if you're speaking to them about their water consumption, you could also speak to them about their gas and hydro consumption as well, right?
Yeah.
So,
Whether they've fire smarted their house.
Fire smarted,
Anytime
so.
you have a chance to go to your house,
Yeah.
you need to make sure you're doing
Yeah,
all
everything.
the
Exactly.
So it is half August here, so we'll be talking again another 6 weeks to see where we kind of ended up after the summer.
I didn't see anything in there to replace the old rusty van, Colin. Is that in eventually, or were you waiting for another year? Is that on hold?
Just keep poking
waiting for
them.
the electric vehicle to be.
I have teenage kids that are driving.
You
I'm
figured
not getting anything
Get
new
$5,000
until they
for
move
the
out.
van on it. Bring it in on an electric vehicle.
Strategy is,
Councillor
my
Page.
kids will never want to blow up a car.
Yeah.
The rusty van.
Way with the minivan, you can fit everybody in
The
there.
back seats out there.
Then they get over passenger.
He's taking them to chickens. Chickens in the back of the van.
I was just wondering how far we think we can extend the proxy economic data coming off the water meters. Like, I know we're using that for the big players, but there's a water meter in my building. We don't need water for our operations, but those toilets flushings are telling you how many people are in that building, right? Like, there's a certain baseline of that building that's just like, if it's twice as much, there's twice as many people in there. And I can imagine that most office buildings are basically like that, unless you're a dentist or a hair salon.
What's fascinating, Councillor Page, on exactly that is, obviously not planned, but with the pandemic and everything shut down, we have a baseline like we would have never had a baseline, right? And so we can especially in particular see the hoteliers, which again, sometimes when we would have thought, well, is this an actual intermittent leak, or do they have a constant leak? Or when you've got 80 hotel rooms, or, someone always at some point in time using the washroom or running the sink and all that, well, now you can kind of see, well, actually, when, you were down to nothing, here's how much water that was going on, or here's what's being used. So yes, we have that. Now, again, not obviously for everyone, but because we were successful in getting so many installed in the late winter, we do have kind of that baseline, exactly what you're talking about.
That's cool.
So that's like another metric that we could use for recovery, right?
It could be, yeah.
In a commercial property, I think it would tell you how many people are in that building which you could pick up from a Sunday to a Monday, but it would tell you if I have twice as many staff or half the staff, or my basement isn't rented out or it is rented out. I think you could tease it out and get something out
Yeah,
of it.
like I said, to have the data first, right? And again,
for
first
sure.
of all, my goal is to let's try to eliminate any leakage that we have. That'll be my first goal. But you're right,
So the
Councillor
data will
Page.
be integral.
All right.
It's very interesting.
As long as we got enough water for the breweries, I'm happy.
Thank you, Colin.
Thanks
Yeah,
very much,
thank
Colin.
you.
Okay, so we're on to reports. Accounts payable, building permit stats. Anything anybody wants to pull from this? If not, then somebody please move.
I'll move it.
Councillor Woodward and Councillor Page, all in favor? Carried. Minutes from Farmers Market. I think Councillor
Yeah.
Woodward, you want to speak to that?
I would like to speak to that. We've had two farmer markets advisory committee meetings, and there was basically two themes that came out, which was from the first one was moving the Wednesday market to somewhere downtown. Now, we had a second meeting and we talked more about that, and there was, I think, a general consensus that at this point in the season, a movement is probably more confusing. we're probably not gonna get a lot of,
Uptake.
yeah, uptake. It feels like we're just adding an extra complication. But at the second meeting, it was reiterated that the vendors, the farmers would like to see the artisans back. Now, Jordan, the manager, says that she's fine, she can manage that. There was Nadine from the co-op, and she said she has a whole list of artisans that would like to partake. She's ready to go to like pass that list off to Jordan. So there's basically a pent-up demand. Jordan was very clear, and the mayor made it very clear that we have to maintain safety protocols, and we can't just cram the market like it once was, 6 inches apart. It has to be quite organized. So in that vein, she's done a full map of the Cottonwood market with all the tents and vendor locations all spaced out properly. So then she can just fill those with farmers and artisans up to a limit, and that's it.
With farmers having the priority.
Farmers have the priority. So I just wanted to put on the floor, because I need the council to agree as a chair of this committee to allow artisans back in the market. And so I'll read
Councillor Woodward, I think she said she'd probably only could take about 5, didn't she say?
Yeah, it wouldn't be much.
Wasn't much.
And I just want to read the motion so that people know from the first meeting. The motion was, it was moved by Matt Carr and seconded by Ryan Moore, who are both vendors. That the committee recommend to council that artisans be incorporated into the farmers market with priority given to seniority and low-risk artisans. So that's the
I just have a
motion.
question.
Hang on.
So
Putting on the
we got-
list.
That's from the first meeting, right?
that's from the first meeting, and then we talked again on the second meeting.
That's right. And that's what they'd like.
That's what they would like.
So we're gonna start with the motion, if you don't mind. And so if you read it one more time, then
Sure.
you may get a seconder, and if you do, then we'll have a discussion.
So the motion is that the committee recommends to council that artisans be incorporated into the farmers market with a priority given to seniority and low-risk artisans.
Seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. All right, questions? Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Morris.
Yeah, so first of all, I don't think that I think the language in there that the committee recommends to council, we would need to change the language of that so that it's reflective of council approves, that there would be artisans. The second piece is, do we actually need a motion on this? Because I think that I think staff have enough flexibility with the original motion that was passed that we don't need to actually entertain this, that this should be something that staff's able to do without without a motion. I don't think there was any reason that we would have needed to have made that decision. I don't know. Do you think we actually need this motion? We do?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Yeah, it gives some clarity to not only the vendors, but also the staff.
It was specified food only?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll just add supplemental that we agreed as a council that it was food first. And that was when the pandemic was rising up. We weren't sure what was gonna happen, so we're just like, let's focus on food, getting food from the farm to the people, and that's what we were focusing on. But it has calmed down, and Jordan feels confident that she can safely run a little bit of a larger market with some more variety, and the farmers are really asking for some more variety with them. And I should also mention too that the Saturday market is doing quite well.
Yeah, very well.
Literally back up to kind of what the farmers are saying, they were selling about as much as they were selling in last season.
Yeah.
But the Wednesday market is suffering because it doesn't have any variety, and it's midweek, so, sorry.
So on that note, having dutifully gone every Saturday because of the controversy surrounding markets, I have gone every Saturday to the market.
Thank you.
And I have gone to 3 Wednesday markets just by fluke. I work, I never get to go. I just had appointments that took me out of the hospital and allowed me to go, and then I had a day off. They actually give us those things sometimes at the hospital, to go to the Wednesday market. So my concern is that, like, this last Saturday, there was new people at the market, and the circle was quite full. The strip was quite full. I felt that somebody was missing. I don't know the names of all of these, but it seemed to me that on the strip, there was a big farm that didn't seem to be there on Saturday, but, so I'm actually wondering, and perhaps, Councillor Renwick might be able to comment, and I've also been going on Saturday to the Artisans Market.
Right.
At the other end, in front of the chamber. And I'm sort of trying to figure out on Saturday how we actually blend the artisans and the food, because I do believe that we gave food the priority, and so that's still a priority. I can definitely see the Wednesday market having the artisans as a bit of a mix to try to get more people, and then to perhaps draw some tourists off of Baker Street down to look at local artisans midweek. Did you have any, through the chair to the chair of this committee, any discussions about just adding the artisans back in to Wednesday? And again, about this whole status quo, while we try to build these relationships, that the artisans that, because the chamber has put this work into getting artisans on Saturday, that they stay at the chamber, the market stays at the market, but the Wednesday one becomes a blend. Was there any discussion
Yep.
Yeah.
about
that
Yes.
process?
th-
Which
there
I
was.
really support that process.
So Tom Thompson was at the table at the last meeting, and he's very open and willing to whatever it takes to help. And he says he's been, running the artisan piece the last few weeks just because it's a good service for the community. But he's like, if Jordan wants to absorb that into the Wednesday and Saturday, he's totally happy for that to happen. There's no hard feelings there. And Jordan said very clearly that she feels confident that her and her team can manage the process well, and that there's a pent-up demand, and that artisans are waiting to be part of it, so.
Councillor Page.
I'm just wondering if part of the discussion has been around using the Rod and Gun Club side of the parking lot for some of the stalls, in terms of like creating a more dynamic space across the park.
Right, so the reason it's where it is there's bathroom, there's water, there's electricity, and there's ability to control the flow. So Jordan's team is able to control the whole flow of people coming and going from that market space. And I don't think if you split it out across the creek, it would be very challenging to also manage that area. So I think she said clearly she has the map she's developed, and she'll fill that map, and that's it. So there's a controlled manner, which is this would all move forward.
And the bridge is closed
And the bridge is
during
closed.
the market,
That's right.
And
so that they can control the traffic coming into it.
we're responsible for having a safety plan as
Yeah.
any business, and so,
Yeah.
that's the most critical. We can't operate if we don't have a good.
And I think at the meeting, both the mayor and I really reiterated quite strongly that, we don't want to be the town that has a COVID outbreak at the farmers market, because that would be devastating. So it's got to be done well. I mean, it's happening in many other municipalities around BC, farmers markets. So, but just really being clear that it has to be safe, has to be done right. And she said she can handle that, so.
So yeah, I think the only direction we need is, are you comfortable having artisans as explained initially, it was, basically food pickup, and
Yeah.
obviously artisans gonna create more people hanging around longer, but don't have those cases here at this time.
Yeah, the risks are quite low.
Councillor Renwick, you had a question.
Yeah, Jesse, under your statistics here, because I'm a little perplexed on the Wednesday versus Saturday thing. 14 vendors on Saturday, how come only 5 are coming on Wednesday? Like if we're in a food situation here, how come we don't have 14 on Wednesday and 14 on Saturday?
So the Wednesday market used to be, of course, up downtown here, and it was an incredibly busy market. And there you'd have 50 vendors and something like 12 farmers, and it was a big day for vendors to make money. Since the move down to Cottonwood, that people can't access it as easily, And so vendors have not wanted to do it because they felt like it wasn't worth it for them. And then the customer base was reduced because of that. So it goes to, less vendors, less customers, it kind of works together.
Kind of my point.
Yeah. So by adding more variety, we're hoping to boost the customers coming down, thereby farmers selling more and attracting more people back to it. But if we don't, Jordan made it pretty clear that we don't do something, if we don't try to stimulate this market, it might just kind of fizzle out, which would be really sad to lose a Wednesday market. But it was quite clear at the table that we all were in agreement that moving it to impinge anywhere around Baker Street is it's just off the limits for this year because of COVID, and wanting to make sure that the brick and mortar have all that they need to keep going. So this is just all we're doing is just adding some more variety and hoping, and also doing more promotion and hoping to boost up Wednesday, because Saturday actually is doing fairly well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't understand why more than half of your farm vendors wouldn't be there on Wednesday if you know that if there's more vendors, there's more people.
There's two of them, Councillor Renwick, there's actually two of them. One of them from Creston, comes over the hump from Creston, and he goes to Cranbrook on a Wednesday.
Okay.
Right? And then there's one from Grand Forks that doesn't come on Wednesday because they have a market over there. So you lose two right there. And you had 12 to start with, now you're down to 10.
And it has to be worth it for them.
And it depends what produce they have at the time too, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Matt Carr is a consistent,
Very consistent.
like he's really into the market idea, and his business model depends on it. So. Councillor Anderson, do you have something?
Yeah, no, I just did look up the previous market resolution, and there's nothing in here that states that it's food only. I have no problem with it in principle, but we actually don't need to make a decision on that. Staff does have the authority to make the decision according to the last resolution that we voted on and passed. So, but I'm happy to support this.
Okay.
So, thanks to Councillor Woodward for his experience and good work on this committee. So it's really made a difference in getting to this point, and I think he wanted to give this report tonight to let council know where we're heading. And of course, at the end of the day, if something were not to work down there, we would be responsible. So it's important that we're up to speed and we're supporting the move going forward. So that's why he came to ask for council support tonight. So, everybody okay with where we're heading?
Yep, so we
Favor?
have a motion.
Yeah, we have it already.
Yep.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I had a notice of motion, which I think in Heinz, sorry?
I thought we were going to talk about more correspondence, what I had emailed you about earlier.
Oh, right, absolutely, yes, go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
So I just wanted
sorry.
to bring up, in our correspondence package that staff sent us, we received information about the CPR. And there's some rumors around town saying that someone from the city of Nelson actually called and invited the CPR police to it's important to know, what the city of Nelson actually is doing and has control over, and what other people with other jurisdictions are doing. So I just wanted to ask the question if the city of Nelson has ever called, or do we call, or do we make a practice of calling the CPR police, asking them to come into our community? If we don't do it, is it potentially that the police would do that? Just, can you explain that relationship to me, please?
Well, we don't as city staff. I know they work with the Nelson Police, but my understanding is, they do this on a regular basis. They have to ensure that, just from their liability point of view, that they're making a good effort, that people aren't trespassing and putting themselves in dangers.
Okay, so the city of Nelson wouldn't call, it potentially the police, the Nelson Police Department would know?
I don't think the Nelson Police, we can ask.
I can find out for
Can we
you.
ask? Yeah, that would be great. I think it's just important for us to know, because the other thing is, it seemed that it wasn't necessarily, I understand from their liability perspective why they would be trying to provide education and deterring people, but it sounds like they were being quite aggressive, and I know there were, you know, a few years ago, soccer moms that are, you know, with their kids on a Saturday crossing the tracks where, sure, if every kid that's played soccer in Nelson has probably crossed the tracks there. And, you know, and instead of, you know, there being proper signage up and them taking an educational approach, they're being extremely aggressive. And I'm just wondering if we want to let them know that we, you know, we would appreciate a safety approach, but not a really vigilante approach in our communities when they come through. Because of course, the safety piece is important, but that type of really aggressive behavior, particularly during a pandemic, seems entirely inappropriate. You know, threatening to throw people in jail for crossing a railway track is completely ridiculous.
I guess for me, I'd just be careful on getting a response, and the particular response that we received had me more questioning of mental health concerns about the document that we received than anything else. And us not being a party or witness to what exactly transpired between the group, I'm not going to dispute either way. I'm not there, but I just think we just really need to be careful on getting, you know, taking that as what has happened. I know of other people who have actually got a ticket themselves, people that I would, you know, didn't expect. Again, I think that a lot in our community don't think that they're real, almost, like you're not a real police officer. So I don't know how that part of their job, you know, can go with them if they're saying, no, I am a CPR police officer and I actually am outside of CP. I'm actually an actual police officer, not tied to CP.
Can you explain that? Because that's very confusing to me.
Well, I mean, they're supposed to have CPR police, but they don't answer to CP, right? It's an actual police officer. They are mandated federally.
So it's a federal police force, controlled federally, but in support of the private corporation? I don't understand how it works.
I think we'll get Paul in to give us an explanation.
Sure, we can. And again, we know from incidents and people talking about, you know, I was approached or I was talked or I got a ticket or whatnot, and they do come through. But this, even for some of the neighbors for mine that had this happen, they do a lot of walking. Usual path, trying to cut across to go to Cottonwood. And again, some of the reasons they put the trains there was to try to stop people from doing that sort of traffic, you know, going over the trails. Their incident was months ago. And again, so whether they were coming back or whether they came and saw, holy smokes, we've got a problem here, or here was the response, or we've got issues. And I don't know what gets fed back from them that are doing the car shuttling or whatever in this area, saying we've got way more traffic, or what triggers it. I have no idea. I do know that
Every year.
yes,
Oh,
they
yeah.
are. Yeah, and again, a lot of times they're usually helping out with some of the homeless encampments that are down further. And I don't know if that's maybe changed. You know, maybe they usually come here to deal with that, but because they've been sort of contained a little bit more off of their property onto that government road area, whether or not that's meant, hey, usually we're here for a few days and dealing with that group that are, you know, outside of city borders, and therefore we're going to, you know, spend some time doing some enforcement along their tracks. I don't know, but we have, as far as city staff, we have no communication with them.
Okay, yeah.
Councillor Lockenberg.
You know, as somebody as a kid who had to deal with CP police, like I've obviously been thinking about this since I was a kid, you know, after receiving that letter too, you know, you do a Google search on CP police. There's a lot of information about them, so I'll just read it really briefly. In Canada, CP police members are appointed by a judge of the Superior Court of Canada for the enforcement of the Canada Transportation Act and for the enforcement of the laws of Canada or a province insofar as their enforcement relates to the protection of property owned, possessed, or administered by a railway company and the protection of persons and property. So this is, I know this is an annoying thing, but it's 100+ years old, and
I'm aware of that.
when there were times when people would jump on, you know, ride the rails and stuff like that, this was a pretty big concern. It is still annoying, and I think what I would recommend we do, or if we're really passionate about this, is some CP reform probably needs to happen. It's probably needed to happen for a long time. Maybe this is something that a motion to FCM about, you know, that we need to look at CP's mandate. But again, just to be clear, this, as the CFO said, these guys are outside of CP. They just run on the rails, and the two got nothing to do with each other. Nevertheless, new relationship with CP, I think, would be really good to, and this could be a part of it somehow, I guess.
Councillor Page?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Lautenberg on the thrust of that. It strikes me that what we have here is a problem with the built environment. I think we already know that. Like, these conflict areas are happening because people are trying to get from where they are to the water, from the water back to where they're trying to go. And if you corner anyone in a spot, they have to walk, 7, 8, 9 blocks or more to get to an approved crossing to get right back to the same point. That's just over those tracks. That's a problem. And I wonder how we can even work a little bit more regionally and try and come up with some sort of framework or agreement or some way that the regional districts interfaces with CP on the behalf of its partners to try and prioritize where those crossings will happen, so that we can take, because it seems like we can't quite take this to a place that CP has agreement that it will work through some level of a framework to say, okay, like, how am I going to prioritize this? Because to us, to my perspective, from the conversations around this table, it seems like it's very difficult to bend the ear of CP over a little crossing here, a little crossing there. Like, even just the spot that variance we started the whole meeting with is right beside, empties right onto a track that goes right into Lakeside, and you would think that would be a place you would want to put a crosswalk of some sort, just because people are using it all the time. And that normalizes their behavior. Like, you get normalized to crossing the track because you do it all the time, because it is right between you and the soccer field. So how can we take this to a regional approach so they're dealing with the RDCK and we're inside of that, and there's some way to get these chipped off as we need them? Because over the long run, we want all of these crossings because it makes the most sense for everybody. Then they're not getting a ticket because you have a safe space to do.
So I think, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, as an example, if Kevin that lived above me decided, you know what, it's shorter for me to go to the graveyard through your property than I'll just go down your yard and walk through, and then I say, no, you can't do that. So he comes to council one night and says, well, that's the shortest way to the graveyard. I should be able to walk through here. And that's not how it worked. CP Rail own that land. They own 60-foot right of way all along it, right, on either side of it. And they have crossings where people can cross. They just don't have them at every 50 feet that you can run down the bank and hop across the railroad tracks. And they've every right to police that, as I would in my backyard, or Janice, if you decide to take a shortcut through her place. It might be okay for a year or so, and then you go, hang on, this guy's always walking by the back of the house here, and if I let him do it for 2 years, pretty soon he'll have an easement, and so that's really how it works. And they're very adamant about, and there's a few other things needs to be kept in mind here. I would say a lot of this was probably triggered by several businesses in the area, and potentially, in our case at our public works yard, we've had an excessive amount of theft out of BC Hydro in our public works yard from people that were actually living in that section of land and crossing those tracks. Hauling wire, copper wire, and you name it. In fact, even the flipping hanging baskets from the public works yard. Rona, Maglios Building Supply, has been scammed on a number of occasions. E&W, Nelson Farmer Supply. Those businesses are all at risk from people that are, there might be good people crossing those tracks there. There's 4 sets of tracks. It's a working yard, and that's exactly what CP will tell you. This is a working yard. We have trains on it, and we can't have people climbing across here with bags of cans on their back in between trains, because if we move that thing forward, we'd crush the guy to death. And the same thing applies to crossing the tracks, going down the bank, which I've done. With the kids going to the soccer field for years, 15 years. But that doesn't mean I have a right to go down that bank. It means that if I meet the CP guy on there, he'd say, hold it a second, you go around there, and I'd have to obey him, just as you would if you wanted to walk through my yard. And that's really how it works, because I get what you're saying, but there are places to cross the tracks legally, and that's exactly what CP would answer.
I just think the challenge is there, like the regulations aren't getting weaker, they're getting stronger at crossings, so. I know in the past, they're concerned about the number of people that walk across the tracks and trespass. They would like to, I know they've talked to us about an overhead crossing, that's how they solve that. You're never going to get an approval to just have a at grade,
It's not
come
gonna
down a bank and cross it, cause first of all, it's not safe. You shouldn't be doing that. We get, we don't have very many trains, but there's no way that would ever be approved. You would come down a bank, cross the railway track and through the woods. That's, I think our best bet is hopefully get some overhead crossings there that reduces that. We're challenged, right? There aren't that many crossings. Part of it's steep, part of it is, the mayor said, is that working rail yard.
They'll never give that up.
That's like going through our public works
Yeah.
department in the middle of their operation. That's never gonna happen. So I think those overheads, I don't see the regulations getting less. And it's not CP's choice to enforce or not. If it's a regulation, just like us, we need to follow regulations. We can say, well, we don't like work safe rules, so we're gonna
Do our
ignore
own.
that one. That's what you're up against.
There's places to cross, and, even if you did put an overpass over, it doesn't mean that's what people are gonna use.
Yeah, my recommendation on FCM wasn't to change the regulations to allow free flowing of crossing of the tracks, but to reestablish this relationship so that, one, they work better with municipalities on some of these issues like pedestrian crossings, and maybe pony up some money to start being better partners in doing this. They've got a historical windfall in terms of this real estate that, was granted to them at a time when the country sort of needed to encourage rail development, and now they're just sitting on it. And so I think a little bit of work at FCM might be a good,
So there is a
responsibilities there.
special committee, if you look up on the FCM website, there is a committee dedicated to rail safety.
Oh, no way, okay.
Yeah, and they've done a lot of work on exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
And it started right after the disaster in Quebec when the
Yes.
train rolled away and blew up in Quebec, and that committee was established right after that. So CP and CN are both partners in that. They're at the table, so there is a committee at FCM.
Maybe it's worth reinvigorating that committee.
Well,
to
you'd
get-
have to talk to them, but you could keep in mind that railroad goes all the way from one side of Canada to the other. It's not just going through Nelson.
Yeah, but that's why you would be an FCM approach, and I think with active
Yeah.
transportation, and we're trying to encourage people to walk more and more, this might be part of that. Like, hey, we need to start providing more, because that's, to be honest, if we're gonna create a effective pedestrian, or even bike
Absolutely.
corridors, getting over that tracks would be a big part of that, and so,
That'd be a big part.
how do you do that if you're not gonna
Fed
spend?
should just tax them and give us the funds.
Tax.
Yeah, there you go.
That's all they need.
Yep.
Yep.
Stop
Yep.
taxing them as brownfields,
Yeah.
tax them as greenfields, and create a grant to.
And that's something FCM should be working on too, and I know when I was on the board, I tried to get the environmental committee to deal with that, because the reality is every year goes by, the environmental standards rise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's less incentive for them to bring that land onto stream, right? That they're an important asset in our community as well, and, they've had that operation for a long time, and they're very clear about the regulations, and they do work closely with the fire department. You can get the police chief fire chief will attest to that, as they work with our police as well. And, we have dealt with some of those camps that were down there on the CPR land, and it wasn't until the CP police came along that they were able to solve those over the years. In fact, one of them caught fire out just a couple of miles out of town there a few years ago, and could have been an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
And it was a mess down there. These folks, speaking of keeping animals, they had goats down there.
On CP? It's great for weed suppression.
No, but that was one of the camps that was out the highway, and the whole damn thing caught fire at one point, and the police and the fire department's out there
Yeah.
trying to, including the suppression team from the Ministry of Forests.
So
Trying
maybe
to
this
put
is
it on
something
fire,
that Councillor Anderson or anybody else interested would work on up a motion to FCM on CPR taxing brownfields and redirecting some of that. Redirecting the tax.
That's come before.
Oh, yeah,
Before,
Get that funding
yeah,
too.
and we've sent that off
have a look through that.
Off to
Rewrite it.
UBCM and then with
Have
the
a look through that
recommendation, go to
website if
UBCM.
you're, if you
Okay, I
wanna
should-
tackle it, look through the FCM website and there's a mountain of information
Yeah, and
there
see the
about,
ones that have gone through.
about that, and at UBCM as well.
Can I have the last word?
Pardon?
Can I have the last word?
Yeah, sure can.
You know, at the end of the day, I remember as a kid, those CP cops were always mean.
Yeah,
They were.
you were.
Oh, yeah, they were. You didn't want to get caught by them. If you saw, you hightailed her out of there.
Yeah.
And you know, you guys, nothing good ever comes out of a train hitting somebody.
Nothing good.
And now put yourself in that engineer's shoes driving that train that can't stop like a car or a big truck or anything.
And they don't swerve.
Yeah, and you've just, I mean, it was just a couple of years ago, a young kid in Nelson walking down the tracks there with earbuds in,
Yep.
didn't hear the train,
Yep.
and it clipped him, and he lost his leg from the knee down. And now, what did the guy driving the train do wrong? Nothing. So, if they get after you for being on their tracks, I say they got a right to. And there's a reason that they come down hard, because the consequences when the train hits somebody is not pretty.
Yeah, I had a close friend in high school was killed doing exact that, headphones on.
Yeah, so,
And it's not just trains, they have those, you know, vehicles on those tracks.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's, that you don't even know when those show up.
yeah, that's all I got to say.
All right, we don't get everything we want every day of the week, but we get some things, right? That's the way it works. Thank you very much, and that, I'll leave that item on there, that notice of motion, because it can be thrown on that list that we talked about earlier tonight. And, there was, one other one that I had in my mind, since we were bringing these things up, and that was, wood-burning fireplaces, et cetera. And I think Kate can probably have that as part of her package, her own emissions, and the health and effects of, wood-burning appliances. Anyway, I got a whole list that long, but it's just two of them.
Oh,
You
So
unleashed the
anyway,
monster.
I think we can throw them on the list if it's free, fair game to do that, so I'll leave that if that's okay with council. All right, late items, and we have something for the closed meeting, Kevin, that you haven't finished? No?
Yeah.
Just the one question for what council wants to do in a couple meetings that we're.
Okay, so a motion to adjourn this meeting,
Right here.
right there, Councillor Renwick, second by Councillor Page, all in favor? Okay,